If a single show were to represent the 2010s in animation, it would have to be Adventure Time. The show is now known for launching the careers of practically every major name in animation for several years afterwards, while inspiring creative works far outside its immediate reach. The semi-serialized style makes watching the show a pleasant experience, whether you're binge-watching the series or picking out random episodes as they air. And the DNA of Adventure Time exists in so many other shows, from the style of humor to the designs of its characters to even the methodology in which it's created. This is a method where the show is written by the storyboard artists, giving each episode a much faster pace, as all they need to do is fit into a very general outline and the visual and written gags flow together much more effectively. Because each episode is written with so much more control from the creatives in charge, it's not a surprise that Adventure Time started so many careers. In its first season, Adventure Time had garnered roughly 2.5 million viewers, a notable increase from the rest of the network's programming at the time, but more importantly than the number of viewers was the demographic of those viewers. In addition to reaching Cartoon Network's target audience, Adventure Time also found success among teens and adults, two demographics that the other networks had never managed to find success in attracting, at least not with the same kids programming they were airing. And domestic audiences weren't the only people impressed. Critics praised the show and have rewarded it with a multitude of awards and accolades, making this show's pedigree one that many other projects are proud to have associated with. A major reason that Adventure Time was able to obtain such an enthusiastic audience has to do with the way it presented its setting and characters, and then how it followed up on those changes. Sure, in the early seasons, Adventure Time was more of a show for kids, with the occasional gag or bit that adults would appreciate, but as the show went on, it matured, for lack of a better word, all while still staying grounded in the silly humor that defined its early days. Adventure Time was a show that grew up alongside its audience, meaning that the kids who watched the debut were teenagers by the time it finished airing, but never stopped appreciating the show the whole time, because it was staying on their level. This is a retrospective of Adventure Time, designed to point out what about the show was, and still is, so beloved by so many different audiences. This retrospective will be split up into individual episode sections, themselves split between a recap of the plot and a review of the episode itself, both in themes and construction. This allows for an easier viewing experience with plenty of breakpoints throughout, so you don't have to watch the entire video in one sitting, nor do you have to, watch the video. This retrospective is a little more than a slideshow with my voiceover, so the intended viewing experience is to put this on in the background while you eat lunch or something. Anyway, enough talking about the video, let's get straight into things. Pilot Adventure Time. While doing a dance Jake downloaded from the internet with his mind, Penn notices Princess Bubblegum's rainicorn flying overhead while crying. Penn and Jake follow her, trying to cheer her up with jokes before arriving at the border of the Ice Kingdom, where they see why she is so sad. Princess Bubblegum has been kidnapped by the Ice King. So they take a few penguins and sled into the kingdom, taking out a few monsters with snowballs before arriving at the castle. Penn does battle with the Ice King, but gets frozen as Jake is chatting it up with Lady Rainicorn. But after his mind is transported back in time, and to Mars, where Abraham Lincoln gives him a pep talk, Penn breaks out of the ice and chases down the king. He leaps from Jake's back to rescue the princess, as Jake takes out Ice King by punching off his crown. Once saved, Princess Bubblegum rewards Penn with a kiss, and he leaves with Jake to save an old man who's being robbed by ninjas. Initially pitched to Nickelodeon's Random Cartoons, this pilot was instead picked up by Cartoon Network when attempts to get Nick to pick up the show properly fell through. This is why the pilot remains at such a low resolution in this retrospective. It's never been officially licensed out because, the networks are competing. As a pilot, it carries with it little of the characterization the characters will be known for moving forward, as well as almost none of the original cast. Only John DiMaggio reprises his role of Jake the dog. But what does remain consistent is arguably the most important part of the show, the style. Jokes at first don't move the plot forward, but then they do when the plot shifts around punchlines. It's as if the writers are playing off one another, with one person writing something and the other yes-anding it to the next beat of the story. This creates a type of plot structure where the destination is not particularly important and the journey's all there is, or in other words, an adventure. A time of adventure. The title card. Slumber Party Panic. Finn and Princess Bubblegum are working on a resurrection potion, designed to bring the dead candy people back to life. But while testing this potion, it splashes on a graveyard, not bringing the candy people to life, but undeath. Princess Bubblegum sequesters all the citizens of the Candy Kingdom inside her castle, asking Finn to make a royal promise not to tell anyone about the zombie outbreak, as candy people explode when they're scared. She works on a decorpsinator serum, while Finn is tasked with keeping the people at the slumber party distracted, but Jake is constantly trying to get Finn to reveal his secrets. Finn, under the guise of playing party games, distracts Jake and convinces the candy people to wear blindfolds and smash piñatas, actually the encroaching zombies. Once they're all dispatched, Princess Bubblegum returns and Finn tells her and Jake what really happened, causing time to freeze because Finn broke his royal promise. Two Gumball Guardians grab Finn and PB, demanding a trial by math, despite Finn being bad at math. But the question is easy and the solution is so simple, it helps PB solve her own equation as she overlooked it for being too simple. The duo returns to the castle, and Princess Bubblegum is able to return the undead to regular life. As understood by Finn, the moral of the story is that if you break your promises, you get to fight zombies and have a slumber party and reverse death. The gag being that Finn missed the point of the moral, as it was a tenuous point in the first place. For one, breaking a promise might hurt the person you made the promise to, and will make future promises mean far less as people trust in you less. But in universe, Gumball Guardians will grab you out of time to make you undergo trials. The first season of Adventure Time is a show far less interested in telling a cohesive story with a solidly defined moral than it is in showing off a series of gags that keep the viewer guessing as to where the story could go next. But this isn't to say that these lessons are entirely absent. Jake winds up teaching the real moral, that it's okay to withhold information from your friends without lying to them. If Finn had just said, "I can't tell you because I promised PB I wouldn't," then a real friend like Jake wouldn't have pressed the issue. Saying you're not telling somebody something and explaining why is ironically more honest than refusing to elaborate at all, and sometimes honesty is more about being honest with intentions than it is about revealing information. Trouble in Lumpy Space. After falling fangs first onto Jake at a tea party, Lumpy Space Princess reveals that she may have infected him with the lumps, and that he has to take an antidote that can only be found in Lumpy Space before sundown, or he'll be lumpy forever. They head to Lumpy Space, where the group meets LSP's princess, but when she argues with them, they ban her from using the car, meaning they can't go to Makeout Point to get the antidote, without calling one of LSP's friends for a ride even though she's dating her ex. Along the way, Jake starts transforming more and more into a lumpy spaceman. They arrive at Makeout Point, where they see some teenagers taking turns sitting on the antidote, a ball that turns them smooth. But it's too late as Jake has become fully lumpy, more obsessed with the weekly prom-coming dance than returning to normal. Finn allows the teens to bite him so he can be lumpy enough to fly to the dance, where he tries to get Jake to sit on the antidote, which only works when Finn fully transforms and starts refusing to share. Once cured, Jake cures Finn as well, and they apologize to LSP by dancing with her. The early seasons of Adventure Time have far less continuity than later seasons by the simple fact that there are fewer episodes to fall back on. So the job of the early episodes of any show is to introduce the setting and characters. Here we meet Lumpy Space Princess. At first, she comes across as self-centered and uncaring, and this is because she is. In order to have a character develop, there first has to be a point that they develop from, and so LSP is shown as not really caring she's making Jake lumpy, at least from the outside. Sure, her personality is off-putting, but she does at least try to do the right thing by taking her friends with her to Lumpy Space. And when Jake himself turns lumpy, he stops caring about turning back. Even Finn begins to grow selfish when he becomes fully lumpy. It's this disparity between the personalities of each character at the end of the episode that actually informs the type of person Lumpy Space Princess is. She's contradicting her existing nature to treat Jake's lumpiness, despite this being something that she would obviously view as unappealing. The fact that the Guardians of the Antidote are spoken about in whispers due to being smooth shows that LSP is even a bit weirdly accepting. If the people of Lumpy Space show so much animosity towards smooth people, the very fact that LSP would spend time with the others in the first place tells us more about her personality than anything else could. Prisoners of Love. Finn and Jake are cooling off by playing in the Ice Kingdom when they bump into the Ice King. They make fun of him when he demands respect, so the Ice King freezes them and brings the duo to his lair, where Finn and Jake are locked in a cell with several princesses. The Ice King explains that he's trying to kidnap every princess, as he intends to marry one of them eventually. Jake is completely frozen, and Finn doesn't have anything to escape with, but when he sees the Ice King desperately trying to make sure everyone is having fun in their cell, he comes up with a plan. Finn encourages the princesses to fake fun as much as possible to invite the Ice King into the cell with them, and when he comes inside, they beat him up and leave. When the Ice King is punched, his crown flies off and he passes out, hallucinating a cosmic owl, who tells him he's a sociopath, though even in his dream the Ice King ignores this. While dropping off the princesses at their homes, the slime princess tries confessing to Finn, though Jake covers for him by saying Finn pees his pants and can't marry her. The Ice King is one of the few characters returning from the pilot. He's downgraded from his already pretty quick-to-dispatch self. Here, his habit of collecting princesses is already displayed as a pathetic habit that makes all of the future humiliations of his character well-deserved, rather than risking the guy coming across as a hopeless romantic. Sometimes you just need a villain whose purpose is to get beaten up without anybody in the audience feeling bad about it. And while sure, it's a bit simplistic to have a black and white morality like this, it keeps in line with the show's aesthetic. Adventure Time is, at once, a kid's show and a parody of a kid's show. Of course, this is really only true of the first few seasons. If you want to pull the rug out from underneath somebody, you first need to set the rug down, and then get the audience on top of it. The Ice King is a pretty simplistic, crazy wizard, for now. By this point, the truth of his identity is almost as well known as the show itself. People who haven't even seen Adventure Time can identify the name Simon Petrikov. But instead of front-loading this retrospective with a bunch of foreshadowing and deeper character dives, it's an easier watch to take episodes as they come, as that's how these early seasons were written and how they were originally enjoyed. Tree Trunks. While eating some of Tree Trunks' pie, she asks Finn and Jake what their dream is, revealing that hers is to pick a crystal apple from deep in the dark forest. Finn and Jake agree to accompany her to this apple so she can have her own adventure, but they quickly realize she's not adventurer material when she tries applying stickers to a wall of flesh that attacks them. She later attempts to have a picnic with a bunch of sentient signs that surround her, with Finn getting jacked up when he uses his body to defend her from their attacks. She even tries to seduce a tentacle monster that Finn is fighting when Jake is too nice to hold her back from getting involved. So Finn snaps at her, saying she should never have adventured with them and causing Tree Trunks to wander into the woods alone. But she manages to find the crystal apple after all, protected by a crystal guardian who mimics the actions of anybody nearby. When Tree Trunks starts singing and dancing with some of the forest denizens, the crystal guardian copies her, and with no way to beat it in a fight, Finn and Jake start to dance too. The Crystal Guardian allows them to finally pick and eat the apple, and they give Tree Trunks the honor of taking the first bite, which causes her to explode. Tree Trunks is shown to have survived the explosion at the end of this episode, crawling around inside some sort of crystal structure as a demand of the executives in charge of approving the episode. So what was originally going to be a totally random ending to this episode wound up being more open-ended than the showrunners anticipated it would be, and this will be important later. As I said before, Adventure Time is a show that quickly alternates between a kid's show and a parody of one, and sometimes it does both of these in the same scene. Tree Trunks is a character from a more light-hearted series, while Finn and Jake find themselves in a show with a darker tone. But what makes these two ideas distinct is the realm of consequence. How an action is treated has more to do with the tone of the action itself. Finn is jacked up by the denizens of the forest, but because it's played as a joke, it comes across as a joke, instead of being something worth showing concern for. The end of the episode is where these two ideas combine. Tree Trunks is able to save the day by dancing in the presence of a monster that Finn and Jake struggled against, the setting itself warping around whichever character is stealing the scene. In this way, the chaos of the setting tends to make emotional sense, if not narrative sense. The Enchiridion. After saving Princess Bubblegum from a fall, she calls him a hero worthy of seeking out the Enchiridion, a book about heroism sealed behind a series of heroic challenges. Finn and Jake head out to retrieve this tome, solving puzzles and trying to rescue imps, in spite of their desire to destroy old ladies anytime Finn does anything. Jake reassures him they aren't real old ladies, and that everything is just an illusion meant to test his heroism. And then, he is eaten by a giant. Finn steals from the giant to get him to lower his guard, then kicks his stomach to force it to vomit out his friend, though he returns the dollar he stole when the giant looks sad about being robbed. Once inside the castle, Finn is placed into a mental test, where he fights an evil monster, but refuses to punch a morally neutral ant. For his heroism, and in spite of punching the Great Guardian due to his pajamas looking like a devil suit, he is given the Enchiridion, where he learns how to kiss princesses, though he's too embarrassed to reveal what it says to Princess Bubblegum. Like so much else in Adventure Time's first season, the Enchiridion is something introduced as a gag item, only to reappear a few times before its true significance is revealed. But for now, it's just a book that gets tossed into the background of Finn and Jake's house, with a few callbacks made here and there. This sort of raises the question to longtime watchers of how much the show is planned in advance, and how much is made up on the fly. And interviews with the creators reveal it's far closer to the latter, though not entirely. I've mentioned before that most of the show is written by the artists, whose creative process largely consisted of drawing a few sketches about things that looked neat, coming up with a few details about it, then adding whatever they could into the episodes proper. This means that, while all the lore surrounding the Enchiridion was likely not come up with on the spot, there was certainly more to it that the showrunners never got around to adding to the episode, and having details that are unspoken makes it easier to justify keeping the tome around on the off chance that there's another opportunity later on. So while Adventure Time started out as a show with very little lore about it, there was enough behind the scenes, it's not surprising that this could have appeared later on. The Jiggler. While singing an auto-tuned song on their way back from an adventure, Finn and Jake discover a small whistling creature who they name the Jiggler, taking it home for a late-night dance party. The next morning, Finn prepares to party some more, only for the duo to realize that Jiggler looks sick. They feed it some food, and when that doesn't work, feed it drawings of food. But it only gets worse, eventually exploding when Finn and Jake try to plug the holes it's excreting from. After piecing the Jiggler back together, Finn attempts CPR, which teaches the Jiggler to kiss patterns, which it uses to indicate that it wants to return home to its mother. They take this creature back to its home, but the mother Jiggler does not accept its young. Jake realizes it's because they've imprinted onto it, so Finn dunks it in the jiggle juice so it'll be accepted again, and the duo heads home, vowing never again to kidnap a child. Adventure Time jumps dramatically between being a kids show and a parody of a kids show, but on occasion there will be episodes, especially early season episodes, where it's more of the former than the latter. Sure, some of Finn's reactions to the mother Jiggler not accepting its kid back are over the top, and the Jiggler itself vomiting uncontrollably is not really young child friendly, but this doesn't make them the type of gags that adults would find funnier. Just a bit of random weirdness for the sake of random weirdness. This is in line with most of the early show's vibes, but in the long run, episodes like this don't have a lot of staying power, with the only real aspect of this episode coming back in the future is the fact that Finn swallowed a computer. Ricardio the Heart Guy. For saving Princess Bubblegum from the Ice King again, Finn and Jake are thrown a party at the Candy Kingdom. But rather than being able to dance with PB as he wanted, the princess is infatuated with a talking heart named Ricardio, who's able to discuss science with her on a level Finn can't keep up with. Finn starts to feel jealousy towards Ricardio and plans on performing a stakeout to determine if his feelings about the guy are true or not, though Jake thinks Ricardio's a good guy, something he believes is confirmed when they catch the man beating up the Ice King. They confront him on this, with Finn eventually punching Ricardio when he refuses to elaborate on who he is, making PB upset that Finn has turned so violent. But his suspicions are confirmed when the Ice King drags himself out of an alleyway to tell them where the heart came from. It's the Ice King's own heart, who left his body after an experiment gone wrong, and who plans on stealing Princess Bubblegum's heart, literally, to marry it. Finn catches him in the act, and he and Jake beat up the heart, who is eventually forcefully reunited with the Ice King, as PB thanks the duo for saving her from the Ice King again. There's a repeated discussion throughout this episode as to whether Ricardio is evil or not, as though that were a binary discussion to have that could be ranked objectively. But this is not so bizarre a thing to consider when taking into account the inspiration for much of Adventure Time's character, so to speak, early tabletop RPGs. Most of these systems have an objective means of ranking one's alignment, so to ask whether a sentient heart is good or evil is far more valid of a question. This retroactively applies to Finn's suspicion of the guy at the outset of the episode. Even though all he did was make Finn jealous, he wanted to hate the guy and needed a reason to do so. One can imagine that if there was no objective moral ranking system in the universe, then Finn would have just kept stalking the guy until he did something wrong, as he wasn't looking to confirm his feelings, but to justify them. Business time. While melting some icebergs to find stuff to build a gauntlet dock, Finn and Jake discover a flock of frozen businessmen. These businessmen want jobs, so Jake convinces Finn to hire them to finish the dock for them, which they do efficiently enough to get hired to assist with hero work. After taking notes on the way that Finn and Jake rescue the hot dog princess, these businessmen are soon given the job of doing hero work themselves, while Finn and Jake save their energy for the big projects. They spend the next several days eating ice cream and playing video games while leaving the heavy lifting to the businessmen, who eventually do all the work for them. But while being fat on the couch together, Finn hears fuzzy friends calling for help, as the businessmen have taken to kidnapping people to keep them safe as a form of preemptive heroism. Finn tries to rescue them but is too sluggish to do anything, so he has Jake get absorbed by the business machine, where he expands, destroying it from the inside. In the end, Finn rehires all the businessmen to jump back into the iceberg and drift around in the ocean once more. Finn is a hero, according to himself. That means that he does heroic things, mostly consisting of going from party to party and doing stuff like building a gauntlet dock until he hears a quest hook. When he adopts a flock of businessmen, though, these naive-to-the-world types begin to take heroism far more literally, to the point of forgetting the fun entirely. They start focusing on stopping problems before they start, but this means getting rid of the free will that the creatures of Ooh have to make decisions that put them in the danger in the first place. Just 2 episodes ago, Finn and Jake kidnapped the Jiggler by mistake, not because they're bad guys, but because they were acting in the moment. So there's a question to be asked regarding the true purpose of heroism in this series, where being a hero is more of a state of mind rather than a checklist of things one must do. We've seen before from episodes like Tree Trunks and the Enchiridion that heroism is less about good and evil binaries, and sometimes allowing a bad person to go free or putting someone into a dangerous situation because it's what they want. If Finn and Jake just attacked the Ice King for no reason, they would be no better, and most heroism is often retaliatory. My 2 favorite people. Jake misses out on fighting a science cat and a walking shark because of a scheduled date with Lady Rainicorn, only to arrive late to that date and miss her entirely. When he tells Shelby, the worm who lives in his viola, about this, she suggests that he spend time with both at once. This doesn't work out as Lady Rainicorn only speaks Korean, but they adventure together to find a universal translator that causes Finn to warm up to her in spite of her voice now sounding like an old man's. Finn and Lady Rainicorn spend the next few adventures together, excluding Jake as he finds there's no room for him on Lady's back, nor do they have any video games for more than 2 players. When he sees Finn and Lady Rainicorn in their old date spot, he gets angry enough to call Tiffany, a goblin boy who plays the viola with them, in an attempt to make the others jealous. This works with Finn attacking Tiffany, though Lady Rainicorn confronts Jake about his actions, and they agree to get rid of the universal translator and to keep being stupid together forever. Jake, after getting exactly what he wants, stops wanting that because it was less about the people around him and more about himself. Jake wanted to spend time with his friends, not for his friends to spend time with each other. The idea was for them to be more friendly, not just nearby, but it's hard to justify feelings of resentment or jealousy when you were the one who arranged the situation you're upset about in the first place. Nor is it easy to justify returning back to the way things were before, because there's a reason you changed things in the first place. But while there's no real right answer, there are still plenty of wrong ways to deal with a situation, such as Jake trying to fight what he thinks is fire with his own fire, not asking his friends about giving him more leeway, but trying to make them hurt as much as he does by bringing over Tiffany to make them jealous. Worse is that this works, with Finn attacking the guy, although things do still work out in the end. Lady Rainicorn recognizes that Jake was only acting out of a sense of being hurt, and real friendships aren't ruined by one person doing something stupid, the very thing Lady says she likes about Jake in the end. Memories of Boom Boom Mountain. Finn is having a roughhousing session with a bunch of marauders when he hears crying. Remembering a time in his past where he made Boom Boom and no one came to help him, Finn vows to help out the source of the crying, a mountain who hates watching the marauders roughhouse all the time. He tries a few different ways to get them to be less violent, ultimately convincing the men to pet each other instead of punch, but these strategies don't work. So Finn decides to get the men to turn the mountain around, only to realize there's a second mountain who likes to look at the first one's backside. And a coal man who wants some quiet, some flowers who want to pollinate, mushrooms to seed, and so many others who all need help, with Finn unable to help them all. He's about to give up when he has a flashback of Jake's parents finally rescuing him from his own Boom Boom. Vowing to help everybody, Finn and Jake set up a Rube Goldberg machine where everyone helps everyone else, and soon, everything is fixed. Ordinarily, when a heroic protagonist has his backstory revealed, it's something tragic enough to justify their motivations for the rest of the series. Beat by beat, we see this sort of tragic history from Finn, although the details are tweaked in such a way that it becomes a punchline, enhanced by the fact that we're primed to expect a tragedy far greater than a baby who needs its diaper changed. And yet, because the story beats are played straight, what would otherwise be a comedic moment can end on a less silly note, Jake's parents discovering Finn and revealing they're brothers. This is a template of how Adventure Time is able to be a comedy and much more without sacrificing either of those two traits. It can eat its cake and have it too by using the narrative language of a show that takes itself far more seriously, allowing it to switch seamlessly just by changing around a few words. Wizard. While walking around talking about demon hearts, Finn is offered free wizard powers by a Reaper. He accepts and is transported to a monastery where a frog wizard, containing Bufo, the head wizard, begins to teach them a series of useless magical powers, like being able to read the emotions of dust or summoning mayonnaise. Jake is content with these new powers, but Finn wants to obtain the ultimate final power, taking a pledge of ultimate responsibility to obtain these. After getting the last star on his wizard robe, he's taken to a room where some old wizards are using their magic to stop a meteor from destroying the village. He's told he must spend the rest of his life contributing his magic to stop the meteor, but unwilling to do this, Finn breaks his pledge and tries to stop the meteor himself using all his powers at once. He fails to do this, but does convince the elderly wizards to move the village with him, saving everyone's lives. Bufo tries to claim this was his test all along, but Finn and Jake don't believe him, wandering off where the Reaper offers them a full-circle demon heart. The elderly wizards had the ability to stop the meteor from destroying the town all along, they just never thought to do it because holding it in place was the only thing they'd ever learned. Finn is the one who sees a strategy that's good enough as not good enough, and he wants something that's great. So he breaks a vow he made haphazardly, showing that he's not very responsible, as responsibility in this instance was a responsibility to a certain individual, rather than to the greater good. A lot of kids, and former kids, can relate to being told it's important to be mature and responsible, only to find out later that you weren't being mature, but obedient. Finn's recklessness winds up getting not only the monastery saved, but it saves the people who were previously protecting it from a life of servitude until the next sucker came along, looking for free wizard powers. Sometimes the status quo deserves to be broken in the interest of letting something better take its place. And also for continuity's sake, the creators have confirmed that it was the robes themselves that gave Finn and Jake the powers, which is why they can't conjure mayonnaise anymore. Evicted. Jake is scaring Finn with vampire stories, making it difficult to sleep, not helped by a worm crawling on the bed. But a real vampire shows up, Marcelline the Vampire Queen, and she tells him she has spent the last 100 or so years traveling around Ooh, only to return to the treehouse she marked as hers years ago. Jake's afraid to fight a vampire, so he tells Finn they ought to find a new home, and after a bit of searching, they come across a cave. They clean up this cave a bit and throw a party that is crashed by Marcelline, who has also marked this cave as her home. Finn and Jake try to leave, with Finn arguing that any place he has Jake is his home, so Marcelline tries to kidnap Jake as well. Finn starts fighting her, but it's Jake who gets over his fear to attack as well. Yet when he is bit and has the color drained out of him, Finn flies into a rage and punches Marcy hard enough that she willingly lets them have their house back because she hasn't had a great fight in so long. Finn and Jake return to their treehouse to find it overrun with psychic worms who demand a hug. Marcelline the Vampire Queen's introduction. I know I could shorten her name to Marcy if I wanted to, but Marcelline the Vampire Queen is fun to say. Here, she's sort of a one-off villain, though paying attention to the opening credits will let you know there's far more to the character than there appears to be, purely because she's featured as prominently as the rest. In fact, she's one of the only 6 characters to appear in the initial pitch bible of the show, meaning that, unlike so much else in the show, she was planned from the start to come back. And this is fitting for this episode's plot as it makes some of the development matter more. Jake shows a fear of vampires, using them to scare Finn at first, revealing he's afraid of them himself shortly afterwards, and then the fear of Marcy being enough to keep him from trying to fight for his home. All the moments where he argues that home is where you have your friends ring a bit hollow if he's not willing to face his fears or even stand up for his friend when he wants to face his fears. But by the end, Jake is finally willing to fight directly through his own fear, and that's when he finally takes his own message seriously. It's when he earns his metaphorical home that he also wins his literal home, a metaphor made even better by the fact that the fight itself is what made Marcelline the Vampire Queen give it back. City of Thieves. Finn and Jake come across the City of Thieves, which an old woman warns them will turn the duo into thieves if they enter. But when Finn sees a crying little girl named Penny outside the city, he vows to get the flower basket that was stolen from her back from inside the city, and that he'll remain pure while doing so. But when trying to stop thieves in the city, Jake tells Finn to give up on stopping all the crime because there's way too much of it. He tries focusing on just the flower basket, following it from thief to thief, until Penny suggests they go to the King of Thieves' castle in the middle of the city, where all the stolen goods eventually wind up. The king's castle is blocked by a barrier that prevents thieves from entering, but as Finn is yet to steal anything, he can enter. Once inside, he takes a chest and leaves, only for Penny to reveal she just wanted to trick Finn into stealing for her. Unable to return the treasure due to now being a thief, Finn vows to let the darkness of the city wash over him, channeling his inner Batman to steal his way on a revenge path to get back to Penny. But rather than robbing her, Finn and Jake scrub her with soap to purify her again, with the soap purifying them as well. Now clean, Finn vows to leave the city with his heart intact, only for Penny to rob him one last time before running off. As Finn spends more and more time in the City of Thieves, he learns that the city does indeed corrupt people who visit, not through some sort of supernatural means, but because everyone else is a thief, so stealing things is the only way to make a transaction. Sure, it's not the most realistic way to depict a fictional society, but nothing about an Adventure Time setting was ever supposed to depict realism. It's the way the characters act and react that we relate to, and watching Finn grow frustrated enough that he resorts to breaking his vow to stay pure that we the audience relate to. Jake figured it out pretty quickly, and Penny knew it all along. What makes Finn's actions stand out, though, is the fact that after becoming a thief like everyone else, he vowed to return to the good side after he got what he wanted. The exact sort of pragmatism that causes people to resort to petty theft once they realize the punishment for this sort of thing is negligible. This sort of mentality makes far more sense if you consider morals and actions from the lens of if you were playing an RPG. In the real world, we know not to steal, but take a typical person and put them into the land of, say, Skyrim, and suddenly everything that's not nailed down becomes a target for a kleptomaniac. It's not until you're doing really well in a video game that you start to consider upholding a solid moral code, because now you can afford to. The Witch's Garden. Finn and Jake follow a frog into a witch's garden where they see bushes of donuts and cupcakes. But when Jake subconsciously eats one of them, the witch punishes him by taking away his powers and giving him a fat man-baby body. She says she'll only give his powers back if he apologizes, but Jake refuses to do this, working with Finn to figure out how to get his powers back by remembering where he got them in the first place and assuming it was when he rolled in a mud puddle, as that's his earliest memory. The duo travels to a mud puddle in spite of Jake being easily exhausted and refusing to do much more but laze around. But when Finn makes a catapult to launch him across a junk river, he awakens a garbage mermaid who kidnaps him as food for her hatchlings. Realizing his friend is in real danger and being too fat to climb up and scare off the chicks, Jake returns to the witch's garden when he and his subconscious have to dance together as a form of apology. But when Jake's subconscious dies due to being his old subconscious, he starts to cry, convincing the witch to return all his abilities. Jake smacks away her walking stick and rushes back to scare away the mermaid, saving Finn but refusing to admit what he had to do to save him. After Jake subconsciously steals a donut from the witch, something that's in character for him as he subconsciously stole a pair of boots during the last episode, he then has a crisis where his self-conscious spirit tries to talk him out of doing anything close to an apology. So in the end, when the witch makes his subconscious apologize as well, it's fitting as the two offending parties in this episode were Jake's mind and the physical body who urged him along the whole time. It's clear from the beginning of the conflict that the witch is being unreasonable to Jake, but the fact that his reaction is so indignant from the outset makes him culpable, not for the original offense, but the escalation of the conflict. So even though he is mistreated, you don't feel sorry for him as he winds up retroactively justifying the punishment with his later actions. It's at the end of the episode when he finally stops listening to his lazy inner voice, where Jake really earns his powers back. What is life? After Jake throws a garbage bag full of butter at Finn's face, Finn tries to come up with a way to prank him back. So he invents a never-ending pie-throwing robot, or Nepter, that doesn't work until it's struck by lightning. Realizing they need more lightning to have Nepter reach its full potential, Finn heads to the Ice Kingdom to steal some of the Ice King's lightning. He and Nepter sneak inside, nearly getting caught when they set off the alarm and slide into the lightning room. The lightning being stored there is destroyed by the Ice King's ice centipede, but when he notices the robot accompanying Finn, the Ice King zaps it, which is what they wanted anyway. But when Finn returns home with Nepter, the robot just wants to kidnap princesses like his father, the Ice King. The Ice King shows up, demanding his son, though Finn claims that he's the robot's real father. Nepter and Finn are taken into the Ice King's imagination zone, where he shows the robot the potential life he could live with each group. Forced to choose between the two, Nepter decides to prank Ice King with a pie, before returning home with Finn to throw infinite pies at Jake. Nepter winds up being forgotten by the cast and the showrunners for several seasons after this point, not appearing again for a few years, though not in a fairly negative way. Like most characters from the first season, it was meant to be forgotten about when the episode ended, as there was practically nothing in the way of continuity from plot to plot. Nepter is torn between two creators, Finn, who made the robot, and Ice King, who gave the robot its function. You can't really be a never-ending pie-throwing robot without never-ending pies. So when the question of parentage comes up, the audience is also forced to ask themselves if Nepter has more in common with the guy who made it, or the guy who molded its personality and gave its appendages use. In the end, this is a question answered by intention. Finn meant to build a pie-throwing robot, while the Ice King gave it sentience by accident, trying to make up for that later by taking the robot along with him to continue being evil. It's the original nature of the construct that wins out, seeing Imagination Zone footage of Finn and Jake farting on it that actually encourages the robot meant for pranking to embrace pranks as a lifestyle and rejecting princess stealing as a future. Ocean of Fear. While pooting on a newt for stealing their boots, Finn is afraid to go further, as they've entered the ocean, and he's afraid of the ocean as explained by the manifestation of his fear, which emerges from his belly button. Finn tries to recruit Jake to overcome his fear, but this mostly consists of Finn kicking Jake in the head a lot, during exposure therapy. So Jake tries a different strategy of taking Finn underwater in a submarine so he can see the ocean himself. A strategy that works for a while until Jake takes him into an abyssal hole. Finn panics and crashes the submarine, floating up to the surface while an unconscious Jake sinks down below. Finn is once more confronted by his fear and vows to return to the ocean floor by knocking himself out with a wrench so he doesn't have to be awake for it. Once on the ocean floor, Jake congratulates Finn on overcoming his fear, though Finn reveals he's still scared and they return to the beach. Once there, Finn is confronted by more belly button demons who tell him he can still be a hero even if he's scared, as every hero has a flaw. Everybody knows that quote from A Game of Thrones about the only time a man can be brave is when he's afraid, and this episode is the embodiment of what that means. If Finn were a fearless hero, then all of his heroics would matter far less, because it's not as though he had any sort of internal struggle to overcome to get to that point. Audiences are more likely to relate to characters who are flawed than they are to relate to a character who is perfect. So a grand sort of fear that exists as a mental block, even if it's a fear that becomes overcome later, can create much better stories because it creates much better characters. It's not even the flaws themselves that the audiences relate to, but the reactions these characters have to them. We're more likely to think of Finn as a memorable protagonist because he reacted poorly to exposure therapy, not because he was able to swiftly and easily overcome his problems with the most commonly suggested solution. In fact, Finn never overcame his fear of the ocean by the end of the episode, he merely stopped letting it stop him from rescuing his friend. His desire to perform a heroic feat outweighed his fears, and that's what's truly heroic about his character, that he's a hero even when it does not come easily. When Wedding Bells Thaw. The Ice King arrives at Finn and Jake's treehouse, fighting with Finn for a bit before remembering why he came, to announce that he's getting married to a willing bride, the old lady princess. But he wants a bachelor party, claiming he might have to go back to his old princess-stealing ways if he doesn't have one. So Finn and Jake throw him this party in spite of their dislike for the guy, eventually convincing him to go through with the marriage in spite of some doubt by showing him cannibal swans. The day of the wedding arrives, and everything is arranged so that the princess will be his bride when she touches his beard, a tradition of the Ice Kingdom. But on a closer inspection, Finn and Jake see that the old lady princess is crying, and that locked in her eyes is the real her, saying she's been brainwashed by the wedding ring. Jake is able to remove the ring from her finger just before he himself is frozen, and the Ice King tries to go through with the wedding anyway, touching not the old lady princess's fingers, but Jake's. The two are unmarried off-screen and return to ignoring the Ice King. The status quo is God in most series, the default state of the world being something that exists at the end and beginning of each episode, meaning that audiences ought not to be surprised when things return to normal. Sure, Adventure Time has already had a few episodes in the past with bizarre endings that were immediately forgotten about, at least in the moment, but here, the fact that the Ice King is going to stop kidnapping princesses is what makes the episode's plot suspicious at the outset. We know that the Ice King kidnaps princesses, we know that Finn and Jake stop him. So if they can stop him from doing this by helping him to get married instead of a swift kick to the face, then the plot structure remains the same, it's just the scheme that's a bit different. This episode does show off the weakness of the storyboard-driven writing style that Adventure Time has, the fact that the entire plot built up to a point where it was revealed that the Ice King didn't need any of the pep-talking Finn and Jake had done for him all along, as the princess was hypnotized from the start, meaning that the whole plot was a waste of time. But it doesn't feel like a waste of time, though, as from the beginning of the show, Adventure Time has been more or less totally random, so it doesn't hurt the experience all that much that the plot doesn't make sense, because that's not what anybody is watching the show for. Dungeon. At the behest of Princess Bubblegum, Finn and Jake are putting a series of warning signs around a dungeon hole. Finn is curious about going inside, while Jake bets him he can't get in and out within the runtime of the episode. So Finn dives down there, where he avoids a series of obstacles as he's in his element, until meeting the demon cat with approximate knowledge of many things, who beats him up until realizing that he smells Jake on Finn, making him run away. Finn stumbles through the next few rooms of the dungeon, failing a series of fights and puzzles that would have been aided by Jake's powers, before being cornered by the Bucket Knight and rescued by a guardian angel, who reveals she just wants to eat him in a stew. Finn is placed into a boiling pot alongside Jake, who was captured as well when he couldn't solve any of the puzzles without Finn. The duo realize they work better as a team and escape, only to get overwhelmed by the demons released when they take a giant diamond. Princess Bubblegum flies in on a swan to save them, asking them if they learned anything from the experience, though both of them got the wrong lesson. Finn and Jake work best when they're together as a team, each one making up for the shortcomings of the other, as Finn is better at figuring out tricks and puzzles, while Jake makes up the raw power to the duo, though he often lacks the brain power to figure out how best to apply this ability. But this isn't really a revelation, as it's something that the episode says very plainly near the end. What's more interesting is the fact that, while they make up for each other's shortcomings in some ways, in other ways they both have the same flaws. Finn and Jake both think it's a good idea to ignore the signs they just posted to enter a dungeon and even egg each other on to enter alone. But while they have some of the same faults, they also have the same boons. They're not total opposites after all. Both of them came to the same conclusions regarding their failure of working alone, so reconciliation at the end is swift and painless. Not that that was a lesson they ought to have been taught, much to the annoyance of Princess Bubblegum, the actual actor getting them out of the bad situation. The Duke. While Finn and Jake are smashing some potion bottles, they see Princess Bubblegum kicking the Duke of Nuts out of her castle while shouting at him. Finn then throws a boomerang-shaped bottle, which comes around and smashes into PB's window, turning her bald and green. When Finn goes up to apologize, PB blames the Duke for this, and says she'll never forgive the person who did that to her, demanding that Finn and Jake track him down to bring the man to justice. But when they head to the Palace of Nuts, they keep hearing from its citizens about how nice of a guy the Duke is, confirmed when they meet the man in person and see him comforting his son, the Marquis of Nuts, who was trying to take the fall for his father. Finn and Jake learn that the reason PB hates the Duke is because he keeps eating all her pudding, something he only does due to a medical pudding deficiency he wants to keep a secret. So Finn and Jake prepare a false robbery of Princess Bubblegum that is thwarted by PB being unrecognizable, but when this doesn't convince her, Finn tells the truth. PB can't stay mad at him, though she does make the duo go to the grand meeting of Ooh royalty dressed as her, where the Marquis and a red squirrel whose letters Jake won't respond to ambush them. Telling the truth is something that we all instinctively know is the right thing to do, and yet people will go against this when they feel as though telling the truth will result in more harm than good, because the path of least resistance is being truthful, as you don't have to remember and then reinforce a bunch of lies later down the line. But if being truthful hurts you, then remembering the lies is easier. But it's not easier for everybody. The Duke of Nuts is the one who will wind up being punished for Finn's lie about the potion. It's a lot easier to justify lying to stop yourself from being hurt, but harder to pass it on to someone else. So Finn and Jake set out on a journey to discover if the Duke of Nuts deserves to be lied about, as if the guy being evil at all would make it easier to digest. Ironically, the Duke also lying about his pudding habits is what caused a lot of the situation in the first place, a person lying to hurt themselves, making it easier for others to justify dogpiling on him, because he already has a history with no justification. Freak City. Finn and Jake encounter a beggar in the woods, and, hoping it's secretly a magic man, Finn gives him a sugar cube. It turns out to be a magic man, named Magic Man, and he rewards Finn by turning him into a giant foot until he learns his lesson. Finn is depressed because he's a foot, and can't be a hero anymore, though Jake tries reassuring him it's not so bad. When the duo fails to put out a fire, Foot Finn is thrown under a bridge with the other freaks of the area, all of whom reveal that they've been cursed by the Magic Man as well to be various other body parts. Jake tries to convince Finn to stay under the bridge and be a foot forever, but when Finn has a nightmare about this, he sings an auto-tuned song shaming the other body parts into leaving the bridge. After commanding them to form one giant super freak, they get a bit of their confidence back and confront Magic Man again, though he avoids their attacks as none of them have learned their lesson yet. Eventually Finn realizes the truth. Magic Man didn't turn them into freaks for a reason, he's just a jerk. This was the real lesson, and Magic Man converts them back before leaving, as the Super Friends vow to stay as one body anyway. The Magic Man is introduced in this episode, and with him comes a lesson about his character. He's a jerk, and there's a little more to it that matters right now. As a hero, Finn is constantly meant to look on the bright side of things and to look on the bright side of people. Everything that happens must have some small benefit to the world, and to accept that some things are just bad is a defeatist attitude. And yet, Jake embodies making the best of Finn becoming a giant foot, trying to get him to relax and accept the transformation. He's trying to teach Finn the heroic lesson, but the truth of the matter is that being a giant foot isn't great. He tries one last time to get the rest of the freaks under the bridge to forget about their transformations and the horrors they bring, but once they form a giant super freak, even this is not enough to defeat the Magic Man. It's only by accepting the truth that things can go back to normal, that some maladies are not good in any way, and that the lessons learned by the harsh reality would be better off unknown if that reality ceased to exist. Donny. While out on safety patrol, Finn and Jake encounter a massive plant-based jerk terrorizing a village of house people. They try to stop him, but he only harasses them instead, so Finn decides to take this giant, Donny, home to teach him how to be nice with songs. None of these songs seem to have any effect, so Finn leaves Jake behind to keep teaching Donny while he responds to a call for help in the distance. He finds out that the village is being attacked by Y-wolves, possessed by the spirit of inquiry and bloodlust, who explain that the obnoxygen produced by Donny's antics was poisonous to them, and now that he's gone, they're free to feast on the house people until their population balloons to the point that the cosmic owl will eat them. So Finn tries to get Donny back in the village, only for Donny to become a reformed man, Jake's songs finally reaching him and teaching him empathy. The trio returns to the village against Donny's wishes, where he tries singing to the Y-wolves to stop their attacks. Finn realizes that they're making fun of him, so he plays up how much of a dork Donny has become, causing the guy to go into a rage and reverting to his old, obnoxious self. Finn's upset he couldn't reform Donny completely, so they walk away as Donny thanks them for making him a jerk again. Donny is noxiously obnoxious, but he is very good at what he does, serving as the lesser of two evils among the village's people. Sometimes when the lesser of two evils is around for long enough, people forget about the greater of two evils, to the point where it starts to seem like a good idea to try out the other guys for a while, only to get their faces eaten by Y-wolves and remember why you tolerated that other guy in the first place. It's fine to resent a bad situation you're in, and it's fine to want to improve things to a degree, but outright rejecting everything that's maintained the status quo will often have disastrous results if, like Finn, you don't understand why people put up with the situation in the first place. Although personally, I think it would have been far funnier if Donny wound up trying to lecture the Y-wolves and ended up more obnoxious than before, like if he were singing a song about how to wear pants and they ran away in fear. Henchman. Finn and Jake see Marcelline bullying an old man who she calls her henchman. Wanting to protect him, Finn's vow of heroic honor makes him volunteer to take the old man's place as Marcelline's new henchman. Jake tries to protest this but is too afraid of vampires to do anything, and Finn is taken to a victim's house where Marcelline turns his red bow tie white. She then raises an army of the undead and orders Finn to take them to the Palace of Nuts to crash a birthday party. But when they arrive, the undead simply party with the rest of the group while Marcy plays a song for the birthday baby. After ordering Finn to kill a cute plant that turns monsters when he hesitates, he finally realizes that Marcy is just messing with him, and the orders have been a series of pranks. But Jake finally gets over his fear enough to attack Marcelline in the field, with Finn trying to stop him but ultimately settling for hiding her in his backpack while Jake stakes a double. Marcelline thanks Finn for being a good henchman, while Jake and Finn leave, the dog believing he just saved his friend's life. Slowly over this season, we've seen Marcelline the Vampire Queen go from an antagonist to a morally neutral deuteragonist. Her first appearance having her kick Finn and Jake out of their home, justified by the fact that it was technically hers first and they were squatting. And this episode having her take Finn as a servant, then forcing him to do her bidding, justified by her bidding being more or less harmless. Even as she's traveling with Finn, she's making jokes at his expense, implying that that was the worst she was planning on doing. The point of her character is that she is this ageless vampire who has long since outlived the morals of the rest of the world. And while this means that she occasionally kicks kids out of their houses for no reason other than the fact that she can, she's also done a lot of good over her life, to the point of being a friendly face to most of those who don't have a bad first impression of her. She's even willing to fake being destroyed to keep Jake satisfied with the episode's ending, fear being one of the things she's surely dealt with more than any other reaction, considering how much she takes this aspect of herself in stride. Rainy Day Daydream. Finn and Jake have a whole day plan that is ruined by an incoming knife storm, as in, it's raining knives. Me-Mow is out of battery, so Jake suggests using their imaginations, though Finn thinks that is pointless, until Jake imagines that the floor is lava, so well, it starts to burn anyone who touches it. So Finn has to carry Jake upstairs to an imagination machine that will turn off Jake's imagination, dodging a series of traps only Jake can see, like a family of goblins, a riddle master with a terrible riddle, and a plague of snakes. Finn is eventually able to reach the off switch, only to realize that without his imagination, Jake has no personality. So Finn uses his own imagination to reimagine Jake's imagination machine, playing around a bit with the other imaginary creatures he keeps coming up with, before returning things to normal just as the night storm lets up. Finn is more of a realist, at least as far as that term has meaning in the land of Ooh, compared to Jake, who is an idealist. Finn prefers actual, tangible experiences to fill his day, while Jake wants to spend his time with more introspection, which from the outside appears as laziness, when in reality he's flexing a valuable mental muscle. The ability to take mundane situations and then to find something more interesting about them is what gives Jake his personality, as it is with the show itself, notorious for being completely unpredictable, and making each episode worth watching as no amount of prior media knowledge could make the plots easy to see coming. So this episode serves as a microcosm of the show itself in these early days, where the wacky randomness that some of the audience may not be able to see the appeal in is the appeal. The fact that it eschews so many tropes and even common sense is what makes Adventure Time stand out from the rest of the cartoon world of the moment. What have you done? Finn and Jake have been sent on a secret mission to kidnap the Ice King and bring him to justice, though they struggle to remember what it was Princess Bubblegum told him he was being arrested for. They bring the Ice King back, where he is thrown into a dungeon with Finn and Jake told to await his screams of anguish, left alone with the prisoner while PB attends to other business. But while he's in his cell, the Ice King convinces Finn and Jake that they're the bad guys because they haven't charged him with anything recently and he's legally innocent. So Finn and Jake set the Ice King free and put themselves in the cell, with this act moving the Ice King so much he considers them friends. But PB leaves the hospital wing, finally revealing why she wanted the Ice King arrested. He gave the Candy Kingdom freezer burn flu by scratching his beard over the castle, and the only cure is his screams. Finn still doesn't want to punch him, as his beard scratching was likely accidental, but he goes to the Ice Kingdom anyway to confront the man. There, the Ice King is trying to play board games with the duo as he considers them friends, but when he tries to swat Jake, believing he's a bug, off of Finn's shoulder, Finn gets the idea to fake being killed by the blow, so the Ice King will loudly mourn his death. This mourning manages to reach the Candy Kingdom and it cures the freezer burn flu. As I've stated before, some series just need a bad guy to beat up on consequence-free, the kind of person that more or less already has it coming. This episode plays with the idea of a character like this in the Ice King. Finn and Jake are told to arrest him, which they do without question, assuming he's the kind of guy who deserves to be arrested. It's not until he declares himself actually innocent that his villain status is questioned. Sure, Ice King is still a bad guy, but is he the bad guy? Is being evil something that happens all the time, or is it just a factor of a bunch of different things one does across a spectrum of behaviors? It is later revealed that his grand misdemeanor was scratching snow out of his beard over the Candy Kingdom, which isn't an evil thing to do, and arguably not something he could have predicted would cause a pandemic. By this point in the series, Adventure Time is already questioning the roles of the heroes and the villains of the series, and willing to suggest that the roles are not as solid as so many other works portray them to be. Ice King can be a recurring villain, but that doesn't mean he's the antagonist of every episode, nor of every episode he's a part of. The end of the episode even forgives him to an extent, with the cure to the freezer burn flu not being extracted forcefully, but with deception instead. Finn meets his hero. After rescuing Mini Queen from a swamp giant, Finn and Jake come across the sword of Billy, one of Ooh's greatest heroes, and this sword opens a crack to Billy's cave. They meet Billy, who is now old and retired. Finn and Jake talk about how he's an inspiration to them, but Billy says that he has long since given up on violently saving the day because it will just be dangerous again once he's done. So Finn and Jake set out to save the day non-violently, trying to help an old cobbler being chased by a dragon by feeding him, then opening up a gruel stand where they feed hungry people stone skin potions to make them tough enough not to need saving. The cobbler has to go to the dermatologist to get his skin de-stoned, and he leaves Finn and Jake behind to guard his store, though they meet with customers anyway and turn their shoes ultra-violent. even giving Lumpy Space Princess a makeover where she becomes a killing machine. Ultimately, they come back across the swamp giant from before, trying to ask him to be nicer until Finn beats him up anyway. They return to Billy, telling him about how violence is actually great and showing off the old lady the swamp giant did not kill as proof. This encourages Billy to start being a hero again, and he thanks Finn, saying he's his hero. Heroism is often a temporary solution to a permanent problem, with the deeds of various villains being a seemingly static part of the universe, requiring someone to step up and stop it. This is usually the role of Finn and Jake, who are the heroes who save the day, but never the heroes who save everything. Because no matter how much they beat up the bad guy of the week, next week there will be a new conflict they have to fight against too. It is for this reason that Billy, the old hero, has lost motivation to continue being a good guy. Why save the world if it's just going to get messed up a few days later? Finn and Jake try to fight against their nature by solving problems using more long-term non-violent solutions like feeding people and working in a hospital, but it's too hard to fight against who they are, and they struggle not to return to punching bad guys. But this is actually the solution to their problems, because as much as it seems like bad guys ruining everything is a staple of the fantasy genre and that one bad guy will just be replaced by another, what is also a staple of the fantasy genre is the fact that good guys appear week after week as though it were a consistent part of the universe too. The same logic that questions why the world ought to be saved if it's just gonna get jacked up again can apply to the villains. Why bother kidnapping a princess if she'll just be saved? Gut Grinder. While Jake is telling off Finn for playing his viola, and badly, they hear crying coming from the village of the Soft People. Finn investigates this crying and hears all their gold has been stolen by a monster named the Gut Grinder, and they cower in fear when Jake arrives because he looks just like the monster, at least in his larger form. Later on, they encounter the Cube People, who have also been robbed by the Gut Grinder, also fearing Jake's arrival until realizing he's just a cute dog. So Jake dons a disguise to enter the next village of Spiky People, where they once more hear tales of the Gut Grinder. Jake starts to worry that he's actually the Gut Grinder and that he's been subconsciously stealing gold behind Finn's back, and his disguise slips, prompting the Spiky People to arrest him. Finn vows to prove Jake's innocence by taking a gold tooth from another prisoner and luring the Gut Grinder back to the village. This works, and he starts to fight the massive monster, who indeed looks exactly like Jake. The real Jake, upset about being called a monster, breaks out of jail and matches the shape of the Gut Grinder, beating it up and stealing the gold as he chases after Finn. But Finn sees Jake's old viola and starts playing it badly, and Jake snaps out of his madness to tell him off. The Spiky People realize the Gut Grinder is actually a cloth suit, and inside is Sharon, the wife of the Spiky King, who made herself look like Jake because she thought he was hot, and stole gold to buy things. As a thanks for saving the day, the Spiky People all group hug Finn and Jake, much to their dismay. We've seen before that Jake tends to steal subconsciously, but this was always limited to the realm of petty theft from mostly faceless individuals. Here he starts to legitimately worry that he's stolen enough from some villages they've started fearing him, something that contradicts his nature as a good boy, because it affects the way others are viewing him. It turns out that Jake puts a lot of his self-worth in how other people treat him by default, and the fact that he has ceased to be a source of whimsy and starts to be the face some people attach to fear means he loses the self-worth of that idea. It's enough to drive him mad enough to actually become the type of monster everyone else is treating him like. Everyone but Finn, who asserts that his friend is innocent even as the two start realizing just how many coincidences it took for him not to be guilty. Ironically enough, it's actually Jake snapping at Finn for playing his viola wrong that brings him back to normal. After all the humanity he has lost, he still feels strongly about music. It's worth it to recall back in Rainy Day Daydream that one of the symptoms of Jake losing his imagination was forgetting how to play the viola. So it's when he yells at his friend that he remembers the times he yelled at him before, then kept being loved and accepted anyway. It came from the Nightosphere. Finn is helping Marcelline record a song about how her father stole her fries, realizing she has a strained relationship with the man and conjuring Marceline's father by drawing the Phil face on the wall and chanting. The Lord of Evil appears, briefly trying to steal Finn's soul before taking Marcy's base, an old heirloom, and wandering off to steal more souls. Finn and Marcy fly out to catch up to him, with Finn wanting to return all the stolen souls, while Marcelline only wants her guitar back. Marceline's father travels around Ooh, stealing the souls of several characters from last season before the duo catches up, with Marcy not focusing on Finn's efforts in the fight to crush him under a rock. It's not until Finn tries stabbing him in a later fight that he finally drops the guitar and Marcy prepares to leave. But unwilling to let the Lord of Evil continue eating people's souls, Finn tries to distract him by playing the song Marcy sang before. Marcelline and her father briefly reconcile as he never realized how much he had hurt his daughter, and then Finn charges in with 2 swords, stabbing the man in the head and releasing all the souls before banishing him once again. Through the episode, Finn is continuously trying to defeat the Lord of Evil due to him stealing several souls of various Ooh denizens. But this is in part because Finn was the one who summoned him in the first place, in spite of Marcelline implying she did not want to confront her father at all. To Finn, this confrontation was necessary as he saw her hurting due to some unspoken animosity between the father-daughter duo. But not all issues need to be dug up. It's okay to keep some in the past, especially when it relates to a person's personal struggles. Marcelline chastises Finn for summoning her father, not because he went on a rampage consuming souls, but because she didn't want to deal with the guy. Of course, because he is rampaging around, Finn is now responsible for freeing the captured souls, which would never have happened if he had just let Marcy deal with her struggles alone, like she asked him to. It's fine to want to help out your friends when they appear to be struggling, but you can't force them to open up. The Lord of Evil rampaging through Ooh is a metaphor for Marcy's own hatred of her father being forced to the surface as a result of Finn's actions. It's not as though helping her was a bad idea, but he was already doing enough by giving her space to vent about her struggles with her Fry song from the beginning of the episode. People will cope with their problems in different ways, and for Marcy, who's hundreds of years old, it's not like Finn coming along and forcing the issue would have changed whether or not she was ready. The Eyes. After a full week of adventuring, Finn and Jake prepare to go to bed, but can't sleep as there's a horse on a hill watching them. They try to shut the blinds, they try pushing the horse over, and they even try moving it further away, but they can't get the horse to stop staring in the window of their bedroom. Jake attempts to blindfold it, he tries to lure it away with music, and he tries to surround it by snakes, but the horse just stands there. Finn and Jake eventually dress it as a rabbit and lure hawks to carry it away, but the hawks only drop the horse into their bedroom directly. Realizing this horse is tearing them apart, Finn finally resolves to kick the horse's butt, and when he does, the Ice King flies out. It turns out he was spying on them, so they fight the guy while demanding he explain why, revealing that he only wanted to learn the secrets of happiness from the duo, but ended up watching them spend the whole time fighting instead. Finn and Jake don't listen to him though, as without the horse costume they can finally sleep. The Ice King sleeps near them, but still doesn't make him happy. A pretty standard formula for an episode of a cartoon is to have a single minor problem of little consequence and then to have the characters react, then overreact to that issue, escalating to a point where the absurdity wraps around to being acceptable due to sunken cost fallacy. Sunk cost fallacy? While Adventure Time has built up a reputation over the last season as a show that does nothing like anybody else, the second season saw a major shift in the fact that so many new storyboard artists, too many to name, were added to the staff, meaning that the show went from predictably unpredictable to unpredictably unpredictable. This means that sometimes, yes, the show will follow a normal plot structure, for whatever value that term still has, only to maintain the tone that the show is known for while escalating. Funnily enough, the horse being revealed as the Ice King in a suit does not ground the show in anything familiar, as it somehow manages to be even more absurd than if a random horse was really just watching the duo sleep. That their nemesis, the Ice King, would come up with a dastardly plan that was so simple and ineffective keeps the show's narrative structure familiar without anything else being predictable. Loyalty to the King. Finn and Jake rescue the engagement ring princess from the Ice King, though he assumed that she left him in a breakup. So the Ice King decides to revamp his image, shaving off his beard and going to the park to work out, where he meets the Slime Princess, who mishears him as a Nice King instead of an Ice King. Lumpy Space Princess overhears this conversation and spreads the news to the rest of the princesses of Ooh about the new Nice King. Finn and Jake also hear of this Nice King and vow to serve him, getting knighted as Nice Knights, where they become tasked with telling off all the ugly princesses. Finn doesn't feel right about this new job, especially when he's told to punch the lumps off of LSP, but the Ice King's beard starts growing back, and so instead he asks Finn to retrieve his razor, which was stolen by the Ice King. While at the Ice King's palace, Finn and Jake notice a pile of hair on the floor and they make fake beards out of it, soon realizing that it was the Ice King's hair and learning the truth of the man's identity. They return to the Nice King's castle with the hair and glue it to the guy's face, revealing the ruse to the princesses who beat up the Ice King for deceiving them. The Ice King probably could have been the Nice King from the outset if being nice was important to him. He had a deserved reputation as being a bad guy, what with all the princesses he kidnapped, and so people by default assumed any interaction he had with the rest of the world would be negative. He was scheming something. But having that impression shaved away with his beard gave him a fresh start, and a fresh start with a good impression, as people assume he's now a nice guy. Remember that Ooh is a land where people's titles tend to be very literal. So when Ice King becomes Nice King and his history is erased, people treat him better, in spite of the fact that he's not acting like a man worthy of that treatment. Finn and Jake even question some of his commands as he makes them sort princesses by hotness and dateability, giving him the benefit of the doubt multiple times over because, well, he's nice. He must have some nice explanation for this. This contrasts with his behavior from before, where even when the Ice King tried to do something neutral or unassuming, people treated him with suspicion. It's easy to use this as a justification for bad actions, that people are treating you like a bad guy, so you act like the bad guy they expect you to be. But this would imply that the inverse is true as well. People who treat you like a nice guy ought to be treated nice. The reason the Ice King's rehabilitation winds up failing is not just because his beard grew back, but because he failed to treat others the way they were treating him, even when given a chance to start over. Blood under the skin. Finn gets a splinter on the door and decides to wear a thimble to protect his finger in the future. But a group of armored men, led by Lord Slicer, makes fun of him for not having more armor. He asks Choose Goose for a bigger set and is given a poem he has to interpret that will lead him to the armor of Zeldron, which is extremely... To get this armor, Finn must first traverse the Swamp of Embarrassment, where he keeps walking in on old people bathing. He must next silence a crying monster, which he does when it confuses him for its baby and tries feeding it, something Lord Slicer orders his lyre player to write a song about. Finally, they arrive at the home of Zeldron's armor, where a ghost tries to convince Finn to play a game involving picking up a ball with his butt. Finn simply runs past him and finally receives the armor set that he wanted, only to realize it's ladies' armor, taking it off because it's too embarrassing to wear. But the ghost from before attacks him for not playing drop ball with him, and Finn can't beat him without the armor. So Jake taunts it instead, pretending to be the ghost's mother and ordering him to go play outside. Lord Slicer returns to make fun of Finn and Jake for this quest, but Finn makes fun of him for following around a little boy all day. Then Lord Slicer falls off his horse and gets a splinter in his finger, so Finn gives him the thimble and the duo flies into the horizon. This episode's moral winds up being pretty consistent through its whole run. Finn begins the episode worried about the peer pressure from the group of knights, wanting to avoid being made fun of and trying to find a new set of armor to be. As he goes on his journey, he is forced to go through several embarrassing situations, being bullied for those by Lord Slicer, and having this bullying encourage him to keep going, because he assumes there will be an endpoint to it all. He tries avoiding some of the more embarrassing situations, like possibly getting caught playing drop ball, but in the end it's Jake, who's unafraid of being embarrassed, that gets him out of trouble. Finn spends so long avoiding embarrassing situations that he never learns how to weaponize them. Because whether or not a situation is embarrassing is not really up to other people, but to you. Finn's embarrassed to put on Zeldron's armor, but Jake is not. He dons it and immediately dispatches the ghost, then stands up to Lord Slicer, who winds up injuring himself in an attempt to save face when Finn calls him out. Some people are so afraid of looking silly that they actually leave themselves open to looking even dumber, because their insecurities are taken to too much of an extreme. If you can't laugh at yourself, then you don't really have the right to laugh at other people. Storytelling. Jake is sick and he needs a bedtime story to get better. But he won't accept any bedtime story. It has to be real and not made up, and it has to complete a checklist of other plot beats Jake also wants. So Finn goes into the woods to find a good story, first seeking romance by forcing a goose named Beautopia and a fox named Mr. Fox to kiss, only to learn that the goose loves a different goose, and the fox wanted his kiss with the Beautopia to be natural. Finn then seeks a fight, finding a bear who's being coddled by his mother and headbutting him before running off. He seeks suspense by holding a big rock over a nest of baby birds, only to get ambushed by all the forest creatures who knock him out. Finn awakens in a cage held over a pit, told he'll be sacrificed to the forest for his crimes. But before they can lower him into the pit, Finn starts helping the forest creatures, telling Beautopia to confess her love, Mr. Fox to get over his crush, the delinquent bear to stop fighting strangers, and his mother to stop coddling him. In the end, the forest people thank him for making their lives more interesting, and he kicks his way out of the cage to tell Jake all about his adventures. Now cured of his illness, Jake is excited to start adventuring again, only for Finn to collapse because he caught Jake's sick. In order to cure Jake's illness, Finn must find a real-life story worthy of being placed into a storybook. The problem with doing this is that real life rarely represents stories exactly. Sure, art tends to reflect life, but never all at once. To construct a good tale, authors often take multiple aspects of their real life, then compress them down into a better tale. Most exciting moments of our lives actually have a lot of downtime that gets skipped over in the retelling. What is drama but life with the boring bits cut out? So when Finn tries to make a good story for Jake, he attempts to force it, and this only ends up with Finn hurting other people. Because a good story is supposed to have conflict, but going out of your way to start fights is a good way to get punched out. It doesn't make you a good storyteller, it makes you a jerk. Finn does end up with a good story, though. Not one that he was able to fabricate, but one that came about naturally as the unintended consequences of his actions created a position where he could do what came naturally. Helping people get over their personal issues, all at once, by bringing them together. Rushing from couple to couple to force drama is a bad idea for multiple reasons, but when people come together for a common cause, like dangling Finn over a pit, that's when a real-life story happens. Get enough people together in a room, and something memorable enough to talk about later will eventually happen. Slow love. Snorlock, a giant snail, breaks into Finn and Jake's house, destroying parts of it and crying sad juice all over them. He says he's sad because he can't find love, so Finn and Jake agree to help him with his romantic life on the condition he stops ruining their house. Snorlock breaks through their house anyway and starts to look for Snail Woman, though he's too nervous to talk to any of them. So Jake tries showing him how to talk to lady snails by turning into one, though Snorlock, mimicking his pickup lines, only creeps out the other ones. Finally, they try to find out a talent that Snorlock can show off, teaching him to beatbox and swing swords around. This works, albeit far too well, as Snorlock is swarmed with lady snails, whose grinding starts breaking apart Finn and Jake's house. Jake breaks into his own home in spite of the shaking, and grabs a salt shaker, flinging it at Snorlock and causing him to shake off the home. The lady snails are horrified at the sight of Snorlock as they realize he's not a snail, but a slug, until he finds a lady who was also pretending to be a snail. Having helped the snail with his lady problems, Finn and Jake get to repairing their home, while Me-Mow gets way too into watching the giant snails make out. Finn and Jake begin their attempts to get Snorlock a date by advising him to be himself. But when being himself doesn't work, they come up with all sorts of other plans that mostly get their home wrecked, until the end where Snorlock manages to get a girlfriend when it's revealed he's a slug and not a snail. He spent the whole episode flirting with the wrong type of woman and then found love by meeting a slug lady who was also being dishonest, the two able to bond over that fact. so their first bit of be yourself advice was what worked all along. As cliche as it sounds, being yourself really is the only way to make friends, romantic or otherwise. Sure, you could act like somebody you're not, and this may even work to make a few acquaintances, but they don't like you. They like the fake version of yourself you're pretending to be. Eventually, you'll slip up and stop spinning the swords around, losing it all, or you'll keep it up forever but never actually be happy. So being yourself is the only way to make genuine connections with other people who are just as weird as you, the other giant slugs pretending to be snails. Sure, you won't have as many friends, but the friends you do have will be much more genuine. Power animal. Finn and Jake are having a rooftop party where Cinnamon Bun points out how full of energy Finn is, while Jake has a lack of an attention span. But one of the partygoers, a large gnome, becomes obsessed with how much energy Finn has, and later that night he kidnaps him out of his bed. Finn awakens in the Beneathiverse, where this man reveals himself as the Grandmaster of the Gnomes, and that he intends to use Finn's energy as a power source for a machine that will flip the underground and above-ground worlds. Meanwhile, Jake is distracted by teaching bugs how to dance and telling jokes to mermaids, eventually passing out from laughing too hard and waking up at a party on the clouds. For being a party animal, he's rewarded by the party god with a single wish, one that he uses to wish for the Focus to find and rescue Finn. Finn, meanwhile, is stuck in a simulation where he imagines breaking out of the control in the gnomes, only for the real Jake to arrive and smash up the place, accidentally rescuing Finn while full of the energy of 1,000 partying demons. Jake and Finn leave the Beneathiverse, vowing to go eat Cinnamon Bun. At a point near the end of the episode, Finn manages to break out of the gnomish machine, fighting his way through hordes of enemies before reuniting with Jake, only for this all to be revealed as a reference to the movie Brazil and that his overactive imagination was still strapped inside the machine. This overactivity and constant need to do something is used as fuel, with an implication that there's little Finn can do to resist his mind running so wild. Whereas Jake is better off due to him being so lazy. If he had been captured by the gnomes, you can imagine him being worse than useless. Sure, Jake isn't great at rescuing his friend, and Finn would have done better in a swapped position, but then there wouldn't have been a need to rescue the dog. After hours of partying on the clouds, Jake is infused with party demon energy, allowing him to rescue Finn with ease. There's an idea posited that Jake is just a bit of energy away from being able to work as efficiently as Finn. It's not as though he lacks the energy to be that guy, he just lacks the ability to direct his attention towards any one task for long enough to have it completed. When he's overloaded, he has so much energy that he is able to save his friend while multitasking. Basically, overloading every part of his brain to the point that the task is given enough energy, and the same way you can fill up a glass by flooding your house. So it's not like Finn and Jake can't match energy levels, they're the same in that regard, only differing based on how they direct this energy. Crystals have power. Finn is investigating a crystal he found on his doorstep when Jake distracts him with a tough guy contest, only to accidentally injure Finn when he takes things too far. Remembering a time when he injured his brother Jermaine and his father said he would hurt everyone one day, Jake vows to never commit an act of violence again. But then the crystal from before opens up a portal, and Finn is taken inside, with Jake chasing after. Jake finds himself in a crystal dimension, where crystal guardians are holding Finn prisoner, saying they're going to zap him until he's a crystal too. Jake tries to rescue Finn, but because he's taken a vow of non-violence, his attacks are completely ineffective. Because he takes too long to enter the chamber where Finn is being held, Finn's transformation completes and the guards finally allow him inside. Then, Tree Trunks appears, saying she's become Quartzian the Crystal Queen ever since she exploded back in Season 1. In the crystal dimension, she is worshipped by everyone, and she wanted to use her powers to kidnap Finn, turn him into a crystal, then make him her king. But when she pushes Jake back, he hits his head and hallucinates his brother and father, realizing his brother was fine, and his father didn't finish his speech as Jake would hurt everybody evil one day. Jake punches Tree Trunks in the stomach, and she coughs out the crystal, reverting back to normal and apologizing for her behavior by offering an apple pie. Back in Season 1, Tree Trunks ate a crystal apple and exploded, something called back to in this episode that explains the explosion was just her being transported to an alternate dimension where she was able to take over and grow powerful. Motivated by a crush on Finn, she started seducing several of the Crystal Guardians until they were loyal enough to do her bidding and bring him over to treasure as an object, all while being corrupted by her own power to the point of madness. You probably would not have gathered that she was capable of all of this if you had only seen the Season 1 episode, though. This is more or less how plotlines in Adventure Time develop moving forward. A character from the first season is introduced for a one-off gag that fills a whole episode. That character is brought back to serve a similar role in a later episode. The writers use a handful of vague allusions that the character made to other parts of their personality to extrapolate them into a more realized person. This informs their later actions. Tree Trunks didn't have a crush on Finn in the first season, she was just a kindly old woman who overestimated her abilities. But here she is able to exert control over several Crystal Guardians with these powers that basically didn't exist before. The first crystal from the first season was just mimicking her dance moves. It's not like this sort of exaggeration is a bad thing though, just the opposite. Taking minor character beats and building whole episodes and even plotlines around them is what makes this show so enjoyable, an extra reward for people in the audience who really pay attention. The Other Tarts. Princess Bubblegum tells Finn and Jake of the Royal Tarts and how important it is that they be delivered to a royal back rub ceremony, or else she'll be decapitated. She would trust her old tart toter to deliver them, but as he's gone senile, the opportunity goes to Finn and Jake instead. Rather than taking the safe royal tart path, Finn fills a satchel with decoy tarts, laced with a paralyzing agent, and he gives them to Cinnamon Bun so he can take the safe route as a decoy, while Finn and Jake take the dangerous route through the Desert of Doom, where Finn assumes there will be less danger. But while ambushing a group of hobos and accidentally revealing what he is carrying to them, Finn loses some of his tarts, losing more when he takes a second detour through a dark cave, and losing the last of the tarts to a butterfly with the laser gun. Finn finally laments that his plan sucked, and that he lost all the tarts, so he and Jake vow to rush to the ceremony before Princess Bubblegum can be beheaded, only to see that they're all enjoying the tarts that Cinnamon Bun delivered. Revealed not to be poisoned, as they were swapped without Finn realizing. Princess Bubblegum also admits that she was never in danger, and she made up the head-chopping bit to ensure Finn and Jake would be safe. Then, the tart toter crashes the party and rambles about the cosmic sweetness. Sometimes you have to work harder. Sometimes you have to work smarter. Sometimes you don't have to do either of these. But there will still be a temptation to work more towards things that seem like they deserve the extra work. Menial tasks with simple solutions, like walking down the royal tart path suggested to Finn and Jake, also come with suggested solutions that are easy. After all, it's assumed that low-stakes actions must have low-stakes solutions. The inverse is true as well. If something sounds like it's going to be very involved and difficult, people will take it way more seriously, even if the work is actually pretty simple. People often hear about important high-paying jobs and assume that they're a lot of work, and then they assume that anything that sounds fun must be easy. So Finn is told that he has an extremely important life-or-death task ahead of him, and thus he overthinks the whole ordeal by sending out decoys and ambushing people on the off chance they are threats. Of course, none of these threats really existed, and it's Finn's detours and loud announcements of the valuable cargo he's carrying that winds up getting him in trouble, all stemming from the fact that he thought he had a very important job to do. If Princess Bubblegum had just asked him to deliver the tarts like normal and never put any extra importance on this plot, then Finn and Jake probably would have taken it very easy, as they thought they needed to. Overthinking is often the result of overselling. To cut a woman's hair. After being called a hero for feeding an injured bird's chicks, a forest witch who overheard this conversation asks Finn for a lock of princess hair. Finn and Jake are unsure about going through with this, claiming they only offer help when someone's in danger. So the witch kidnaps Jake by sitting on him. Finn needs to rush out to find a princess willing to give up her hair, but each of them assumes this is because he's trying to date them, and too awkward to talk to girls, Finn runs away. But Jake tries to convince him of the danger, saying he needs to get over his fear of women and just find the least undateable princess of them all. So he goes to Princess Bubblegum for an emergency speed date involving a spaghetti dinner in the woods. He asks her for a lock of her hair, and she agrees, but when Finn takes this lock to the forest witch, she turns it down, saying it's not hair but bubblegum. So Finn tells her off, saying that the hair she wants won't stop her from being ugly because she is ugly on the inside. The Forest Witch says she wanted to work on herself and she wanted to get pretty hair first. Realizing he doesn't actually need princess hair, Finn volunteers to shave his own head, and the Forest Witch gets a new wig, which she promptly vows to use for evil. There's a discussion made during this episode that parodies a very common thought among character designers of the last few millennia of human history. It's one where you can identify whether a person is good or evil at a glance, because good people always look like good guys, while evil people are ugly and obvious. Jake assumes that the Forest Witch is an evil witch because she's an ugly witch, and he is right. They're using Wizard of Oz rules in this setting. But the Forest Witch doesn't want to be an evil witch. She is explicitly saying that she wants beautiful hair because it will make her beautiful on the inside too. The shorthand for good guys and bad guys is more or less directly called out at being something that can be manipulated by manipulating the signage. A makeover's all it takes to totally revamp an individual's moral compass. So Finn agrees to help out this witch, not because he really cares if she's good or not, and the fact that she is sitting on Jake, but because the very act of giving her some princess's hair will turn her into a capital G good guy. Of course, this winds up being a manipulation. The witch was evil all along and she merely played with Finn's knowledge of the fantasy genre conventions to trick him into helping her out. So while Adventure Time might play up the good guy attractive, bad guy ugly trope so prevalent in the media, it's at least self-aware enough about it not to come across as though it's reinforcing stereotypes. The Chamber of Frozen Blades. Finn and Jake are on a ninja kick, staking out the Ice King's cave as they heard from Flambeau that he's planning on kidnapping a princess soon. The Ice King leaves, so they break into his home to rescue the princess, but they find nothing, continuing to search the place for clues. Finn is trying to ensure they leave no trace they were there, but Jake is much less keen on hiding, going through all of the Ice King's stuff before accidentally breaking a secret wall, revealing a hidden room. Inside this room is a collection of ninja paraphernalia, including scrolls on how to cast ninja ice magic that they memorize. Meanwhile, the Ice King is at a doctor's office to get somebody to look at his sick penguin Gunter. The doctor is Dr. Princess, who investigates the sick penguin as the Ice King tries to flirt with her. Finn and Jake have trashed the Ice King's house only for the guy to return home with Gunter's recently laid egg, and he finds his stuff destroyed. The Ice King demands Finn and Jake apologize by fixing what they broke, only for Finn to hear screaming coming from his bag. Inside is Dr. Princess, who says that he used his sick penguin as a distraction to grab her. Gunter's egg hatches, revealing a pink cat, and then Finn and Jake kick the Ice King as the episode ends. Finn and Jake spend the entire episode pretending that they are ninjas, but they never manage to manifest any real ninja powers until they raid the Ice King's house. At this point, they read through some of his secret ice magic manuals and finally manage to learn real ninja techniques that are effective enough to smash up his home. It's only after this point that they stop to question whether ninjas are cool. After all, the Ice King is not cool, pun unintended, but he likes them too. Of course, it's because the Ice King tries to hide all his ninja stuff that he is considered uncool, in spite of the fact that ninjas are theoretically not supposed to go around announcing they're ninjas and leaving evidence they've been to a location behind. The Ice King is a much better ninja than Finn and Jake, not just because he actually had magic that worked, but because he kept his mouth shut about it. But in the end, it's not about how much of a weeaboo you are, but how much of a weeaboo you act like. Ninjas aren't cool because they're super secret, they're cool because of all of the stuff we know about them. A secretive sect is just bad branding, and this is fantasy after all. Her parents. Lady Rainicorn is nervous because her parents, Bob and Ethel, are about to meet with her and Jake for lunch. So to assuage her fears, Jake decides to write to her parents and come over an hour early so they can get to know each other beforehand, and that he doesn't have a pet turtle. But when Finn asks why her parents may not like him, Jake recalls the Rainicorn dog wars of recent history that could lead to some prejudice. Then he starts to worry. So Jake disguises himself as a Rainicorn by stretching out to be shaped like one and covering himself in condiments, which he almost immediately realizes is a bad idea. But her parents show up, too blind to tell the ruse, and they proceed to play several traditional Rainicorn games, most of which involve injuring Finn in some way. Jake tries to assure Finn that things are fine because homies help homies, but when it's time for lunch and Jake says Finn would make them a good meal, they misinterpret this to mean that he is offering to let them eat the guy. Jake stops them from actually eating Finn and admits that he is a dog, which Bob and Ethel are excited about because they love dogs after one saved Bob's life during the war. Lady Rainicorn arrives and her parents apologize for trying to eat Finn. They were just excited because they thought humans were extinct, and they all dig into a meal of soy people. A very old sitcom plot in the books is a guy lying to his significant other's family in order to leave a better first impression on them, then getting into wacky hijinks as a result of this lie growing larger and larger. Adventure Time is a show that's no stranger to escalation or hijinks, so a plot like this fits in very well with what you would expect out of it by now. In fact, it fits almost a bit too well, as such an overused plot winds up covering a few details that normally would have passed with no suspicion had the audience not been paying enough attention. Adventure Time has, to undersell the idea, a unique setting. The very first few frames of the opening show a floor littered with debris and unexploded bombs. So many of the characters are fantastical, and the physiology of the more humanoid denizens is off, to say the least. Princess Bubblegum looks human, but her hair is made of bubblegum. Jake is explained as being a dog, but he can shapeshift into bizarre forms without this being remarked upon. So for the Rainicorns to say they thought humans were extinct seems at first like it's going to be this setup to a gag about the soy food at the end of the episode, but it informs the audience of so much more. Something is going on with the Earth in the show. A later episode even shows a massive chunk of it missing, and the fact that it's considered normal for such a thing to occur implies that it was long enough ago in the past to be as unknown history. The Pods. Finn and Jake are training for the ice cream marathon when Finn sees a frog gnome knight in the distance. This knight says he is looking for a successor to his quest, guarding 3 beans, 2 of which are good and 1 of which is evil. Finn agrees to guard the beans, but Jake thinks the magic beans are a waste of time that could be spent on ice cream. So he convinces Finn to plant the beans so they can simply kill the evil plant when it grows, then let the good ones live. They fall asleep while waiting for the beans to grow, and a huge stalk appears. But it only spews a bunch of baby piglets who are too baby to answer any of Finn's questionnaires about evil. The next stalk grows and spews a bunch of magic wands, which Finn and Jake also agree aren't evil. While waiting on the final stalk, they create a tiny village for the piglets and give them the wands, then fall asleep while waiting. The third stalk is revealed to be a massive pod full of infinite ice cream, which Jake starts eating, agreeing that it can't be evil either. They then hear screaming from the nearby village as the piglets have taken their wands to attack the mushroom people. Remembering the evil questionnaire from earlier having a question about allergies, Finn uses the infinite ice cream pod to attack the piglets as they force Jake to dance. He sprays the village, saving the mushroom people, and Jake eats the village clean. Finn and Jake are tasked with guarding a group of beans to prevent them from ever being planted, something Finn attempts to do with constant vigilance while Jake just wants to get it over with, basically assuming that the infinite duration of the task makes completing it unachievable, or at least something that can't be done in a day. On top of this, they know that 2 of the beans are good, so there's actually some pretty solid logic to planting the beans and just letting them grow. Not planting all 3 means that 2 good things are not happening, and that offsets the evil from the evil bean. But people tend to be loss-averse, so they're unlikely to let one good thing happen if there's an equal chance that something bad will happen as well. This is why, for example, the insurance industry exists. And of course, Finn and Jake are heroes. They're convinced, rightly so, they can defeat whatever evil they do unleash. Otherwise, with the inevitability of the task failing, the next person to plant the beans might not be so lucky. The Silent King. Finn and Jake defeat Zergiok, the tyrant king of the goblins, known for relentless spankings, and they liberate the Goblin Kingdom from his rule. The goblins try to crown Finn king, but when he turns down the role, this leaves them with no leader, and the goblins immediately resort to rioting. So Finn accepts the crown of the Goblin King so they won't destroy themselves, and Jake becomes the Goblin Queen. After being sworn in, Finn has read the royal rules, though he falls asleep before he can listen to them. The next day, he finds himself unable to do anything without the goblins trembling in fear, as he's broken a rule and the goblins think they'll be punished for it. Finn can't brush his teeth, chew his food, or even chase after thieves, as the goblins must do everything for the king as per the rules. But then Zergiok returns with an army of earclopses to attack the kingdom. Finn cannot fight them off himself, as it's against the rules, so he puts the mute Whisper Dan in charge with a disguise, as he dresses up in Jake armor to fight off Zergiok himself by clapping loudly and deafening the Earclops army. Finn plans on revealing his ruse to the goblins so they'll accept a more active king, but seeing that the goblins are following the rules by doing everything a king ought to do on behalf of Whisper Dan, he and Jake decide to leave the goblins to themselves. With no king, the Goblin Kingdom dissolves into chaos and disorder. But with the king, the Goblin Kingdom turns into a despotic realm with no freedom. It's clear that whoever wrote the rules the king must follow was lazy, but he was lazy to the point of actually running a pretty optimal kingdom. There's an old concept in rulership that the ideal emperor was one who did nothing, not because he refuses to rule, but because there was no need for him to do so. Good leadership is not about doing government to people, but about empowering them to lead themselves and protecting them from bad actors who would wish to inflict harm that could stop that. So a state without a state is one where the worst of the citizens are able to exploit those who aren't as well off enough to defend themselves, while an ideal state is one that leaves people alone, only punishing those who do harm. Or even better, a good government is one that disincentivizes this harm by creating means that stop the crimes before they happen, identifying the root causes of criminal activity or anything else antisocial, and then to introduce means of reducing the likelihood that these bad actions occur, whether it is by eliminating the desperation that causes crime sprees, increasing the level of education of the country, building up communities, or in the case of the Goblin Kingdom, bringing fear of spankings to people who don't, more or less, run the country properly on their own. The real you. Finn is trying to impress Princess Bubblegum at her science barbecue with a spit sculpture, only for it to be destroyed when she sneezes on it. He's still able to impress her by putting out a fire caused by Peppermint Butler and Chet, distracting her from watching the grill, and Finn is invited to speak on a scientific subject later in the evening. But unable to come up with anything scientific, Finn and Jake head to the library to study, only to be kicked out for being too noisy. They disguise themselves as worms to go to Worm College, but end up in a fight when they don't know any of the material. Finally, Finn asks Choose Goose for magic that will make him smarter, obtaining the glasses of Nerdicon that increases intellect to the point of inventing a 4-dimensional bubble blower. He blows a bubble that produces a black hole, which threatens to destroy the whole science barbecue, and rather than fixing the problem, he merely talks about the potential for knowledge that could result from everyone being destroyed. Princess Bubblegum asks him to take off the glasses to go back to being the real Finn, and when the real Finn returns, he puts his sword through the bubble blower, making a 4-dimensional sword that he stabs the black hole with. Finn's sword flies away in the explosion, but everyone is unharmed, with PB giving Finn the kiss he wanted from the start, as the bulletin list he made while smart reveals this was his plan all along. A common plot in TV shows is for some outside force to act on a character that changes them, ostensibly for the better, only to reveal that this change has made them less likable, or it's changed their circumstances to make them unrelatable to their own friends. This change is then undone, not only bringing back the status quo, but also returning the character to the old version of themselves, giving their loved ones and the audience a greater appreciation for the version they had all along. This seems to be the plot that we see Finn engage with during this episode, becoming so intelligent he is a fundamentally different person. He then changes so much that he starts to cause problems, and then Princess Bubblegum wants the real Finn back, appreciating that he would give up his intellect enough to reward him with a kiss. At the very end of the episode, we see that Genius Finn was planning to give up his glasses all along, and that manipulating the plot in such a way was his original plan. It shows how self-aware not only the show is, but the characters within the show too. Finn is able to play with genre conventions in such a way as to use the language of a stock sitcom plot to get his way. The common language of storytelling that has developed over the last few decades being something that people are familiar enough with, we can basically finish the plot ourselves as soon as it starts. We know Finn won't stay a genius forever, in fact we expect it, So it is a matter of how well he pulls off the return to form that communicates his actual desires. Guardians of Sunshine. Finn and Jake are playing a game on Me-Mow, Guardians of Sunshine, where they must protect the sun from creatures in a cave who are trying to get out. Finn nearly beats the game, but fails at the last combo, eager to try again when he hears from Me-Mow that they can make the game real with the push of a button. So Finn and Jake manipulate Me-Mow into pressing that button, transporting the duo into Guardians of Sunshine. But the game world follows different rules than the real one, and all the traps and enemies are far more dangerous than they appear to be on the small screen. They quickly go through most of their extra lives as they run past the enemies who are too big to fight, before encountering Sleepy Sam, the frog Finn has never beaten. They simply run away as they can't figure out how to select the bomba without a controller, though they're trapped by the world border. Jake tries to forcefully remove the bomba from the UI, which causes them to be torn out of the game and thrown into the real world. The game's enemies follow them to the real world, about to finish the job when they feel the sun on their skin. Since the game is over and the bad guys won, the monsters leave Finn and Jake to their business, content instead to simply get Me-Mow for trapping them in a video game. But Finn remembers the combo move he struggled with before and finally performs it, banishing the game enemies and saving Me-Mow, who then uses the combo move on Finn for ignoring their warnings. Finn and Jake spend a lot of time studying the theory of how to win at the game and only get a bit of experience and practice at doing this task. But when it comes time to actually play in real life, they find all their practice is worthless because the job is far more than pressing buttons on a controller. So the only thing they can use is theory, something worthless without hands-on experience. The best way to improve at something is to do it. Reading about how to do it all the time won't matter much otherwise. That isn't to say that theory doesn't have its place in a journey of self-improvement, though. In fact, it's pure theory that winds up saving Finn and Jake at the end of the episode, as the combo that Finn struggled with was easier to do without a controller in his hand. It's both theory and practice that makes perfect, as just having practice means making the same mistakes over and over, like wasting the bomba before the final boss, and only having theory means lacking the ability to execute what you learned, assuming that what you learned is practical at all. Death in Bloom. Princess Bubblegum is headed to a technology conference and she asks Finn and Jake to watch her princess plant while she's gone. They agree, though not knowing how to raise a plant, they wind up killing it. So they decide to go to the underworld to retrieve the plant's soul, with the Peppermint Butler offering to take them there. Once in the underworld, Finn and Jake run past the Guardian and meet several skeletons who are obsessed with their flesh to the point of trying to rip it off to keep it for themselves. The duo hides for a while, with Finn assuming they've got plenty of time as PB said she would return on the morrow, though Jake points out that the morrow is a bird and she'll be back any minute. They start running, finding a river that a skeleton uses reverse psychology to convince Jake to drink from, which causes him to forget everything. Finn drags Jake onward where they finally meet with Death, who offers to compete against Finn in a musical contest. As Jake was the more musical of the duo, Finn winds up losing this contest, and is about to be put down when he mentions that Peppermint Butler said hi. Hearing Pep's name, Death agrees to give them what they want, returning Jake's memories and giving Finn the flower soul just in time for Princess Bubblegum to return, and then eat the flower. Just as Orpheus and Eurydice attempted to escape from Hades, Finn and Jake attempt to escape from their underworld, but instead of faltering at the last second and being trapped forever, their mistake is not knowing these tropes well enough to subvert them as they need to. Finn knows he won't be able to cure the princess plant on his own or find a replacement, so his mind immediately jumps to a dangerous expedition to the underworld because dangerous expeditions to places are what he's best at. Jake's tempted to drink from the River Lee, only to be warned that the spooky, scary skeleton telling him to drink from it cannot be trusted. A bit of reverse psychology of being told not to drink from the river is enough to convince him not to trust the advice and do it anyway. Finn is still self-aware enough to know that he'll lose against Death in a musical contest without Jake, but his plan to simply lie about the winner via Jake is at least some plan towards getting what he wants. In the end, it's a lack of genre savviness about what Peppermint Butler wanted, their flesh, that really catches up to the duo. They ought to have suspected that someone who can open a portal to the underworld and is on a first-name basis with Death ought to demand a harsh bargain. Susan Strong. Princess Bubblegum has Finn and Jake working on removing several taffy tree stumps to distract him from thinking about how he's the only human on Ooo. But as they're tearing up these stumps, they find that one is actually a hatch to an underground area. This area is inhabited by several human-like creatures who Finn assumes are his people. He finds one woman who calls herself Susan, though she's just mispronouncing son, to the surface, and he tries to ease her into the surface world in spite of her being afraid of everything up there. After a day and a song, Finn learns that she loves eating candy, so he takes her to the Candy Kingdom. Susan tries to eat Peppermint Butler, but Finn says he is off limits, though everything else is fair game. Hearing this, Susan decides to eat everyone but Peppermint Butler, and runs off to get the rest of her people to join in the feast. Realizing he may have doomed them all, Finn works with Princess Bubblegum to make the candy people scary enough not to eat, though they're too cute to pull this off. He tries to use shadows to scare the others, but Susan's taught them how to learn, and they're not afraid anymore. When a group of marshmallow men run out to attack and are lit on fire, the tribe's clothing starts to burn and they tear off their hats, revealing animalistic features. Finn realizes that they weren't humans after all, though Jake cheers him up by saying that everyone's a brother. Introduced this season is the idea that Finn is the only human in all of Ooo, though this was a concept that was sort of brought up before and one that really gets developed later on. In Season 1's episode Ocean of Fear, Finn's fear of the ocean was introduced, meant to be expanded upon by claiming the fear stemmed from being abandoned as a baby due to harsh waves pushing him away from his loved ones. But this was more so about Finn's lack of a family and later adoption by Jake's. There were plenty of humans in the first season, although the fact that they were never explicitly stated to be humans is what is called back to here. All of them are now goblins or human-esque entities, similar to Finn but not a human like he is, just humanoid. So Finn seeks out people who are like himself, if only to ensure he's not the last of a dead breed. When he finds Susan Strong and the rest of the folks living in Beautopia, not yet given that name, he's excited not just because he has found some friends, but a tribe. It means that when he dies, humanity doesn't die too. Of course, by the end of the episode, he loses a bit of hope as he realizes that, like so many times before, the other humans were just humanoids, not like him. As with most things early season, it's hard to tell if by the end of the episode Susan's real identity was planned or not. The fact that her headwear is never removed means that something was intended for her, but we never get confirmation till far later. Not that it matters. Jake tells Finn in the end that species does not matter as much as friendship. As far separated from his kin as Finn is, he still has a family, just not a blood family. Mystery Train. It's Finn's birthday, and Jake is taking the duo by train to see his present. As Finn is boarding the train, he's creeped out by the weird conductor who keeps calling him a friend. Once aboard, they overhear Mr. Candy Cane apologizing for accidentally hitting Colonel Candy Corn every time the train hits a bump, and after the Colonel threatens him and the train enters a tunnel, Mr. Candy Cane becomes a skeleton. Finn realizes there's a murder mystery afoot and starts investigating, eliminating the Colonel as a suspect because it's never the first guy you suspect, then eliminating the conductor because he's way too obvious for being so creepy. Finn's proven right when the Colonel becomes a skeleton in the next tunnel, and Finn begins interrogating others aboard the train, each one disappearing after the accusation. After a montage of gathering random evidence, Finn gets everyone in the caboose of the train to walk through his logic. And then everyone but Finn the conductor becomes a skeleton. He chases after the guy with his sword, working up to the front of the train before cornering the murderer, who reveals himself as Jake. The entire thing was an elaborate ruse, as Finn's real birthday present was a murder mystery to solve. Because of the damage caused by Finn's sword, though, the train barrels off a cliff, landing on a mountain of gelatin, which was not part of the plan. Finn is a heroic archetype, and as a heroic type he loves to do things that heroes are supposed to do, like solving mysteries. So it makes sense that his birthday present would be a mystery, and the fact that he's so eager to solve it mixes with a few other things that show more enthusiasm than he had naturally stumbled across one. Finn explicitly calls out a few common media tropes when trying to solve the mystery, proving that people are innocent because the evidence is too great against them and they must be a red herring, reducing suspicion of the actual perpetrator just because he looks too suspicious. What Finn wanted out of the murder mystery was twofold. He wanted something nice and convoluted, and then he wanted an epic chase to climax the whole scenario. He got both of these with a montage and a chase sequence, making it a great gift that was partially of his own creation, as had Finn taken a rational approach and swept through the card thoroughly, he certainly would have seen Jake's foot just off-screen, controlling the conductor. Go with me. Jake is headed to couples movie night, and he invites Finn. As long as Finn can find a +1, he's okay with smooching. Finn immediately thinks of Princess Bubblegum, though she turns him down as she is practicing for the Whistling Choir Deathmatch Championship. Undeterred, Finn asks Jake for advice on how to convince PB to go to the movies with him, and suggests making her jealous by calling up Marcelline. They laugh loudly outside of Princess Bubblegum's castle, but she only asks them to be quiet. Jake leaves to prepare a loot suit for part 2 of his plan, while Marcelline convinces Finn to take dating advice from an actual girl. Her advice is to prove that he is fun by doing something he finds fun, like wrestling. So Finn combines Jake and Marcy's plans by attacking Princess Bubblegum in a loot suit, which gets him kicked out of the castle. Marcelline suggests that Finn do something to get her heart racing, and so they find and tame a pack of wolves to release into PB's bedroom, which gets him banned from the Candy Kingdom. While lamenting that he's never going to find a date to the movies, he realizes that Marcelline would be a good option and tries to woo her. She turns him down until realizing that Finn wasn't trying to date her, he just wanted to go see a movie as friends. The two arrive only to be grossed out by the romantic movie and from seeing all the other couples making out, so they bring back their pack of wolves to crash the showing. For most of the early seasons of Adventure Time, Finn has had a somewhat unrequited crush on Princess Bubblegum. Some episodes he's scheming to get a kiss from her with an elaborate plan involving danger, others he's terrified of anything approaching romance as he literally runs away in fear when the subject gets brought up. Sure, it's common for adolescents to have mixed feelings on romance, and Finn's no exception, but here he's forced to confront potential feelings of rejection from PB, and consider where his emotions lie if she's unavailable. Finn and Princess Bubblegum have been the main couple of Adventure Time since the pilot, but without any real confirmation of the two dating, this aspect of their characters remains in limbo indefinitely, which is very common in television shows, especially those that run for a long time. His attention turns towards Marcelline, who he actually has far more in common with. For example, his suggestion on things that are fun to do is wrestle, which Princess Bubblegum hates enough to banish him from her castle, but is something that Marcelline does in response to him asking her out. PB hates that her bedroom was filled with wolves, but Finn and Marcy had a great time gathering them up to move him over. And sure, romantic partners don't need to have everything in common with you, but Finn was never looking for one, just someone to see a movie with. Belly of the Beast. Finn and Jake are woken up by a rampaging beast who shoots fireworks from his mouth. But when they hear somebody from inside its stomach shouting for help, they decide to allow the beast to eat them so they can figure out who is trapped in there. It turns out to be a small bear who only wanted help putting up streamers for a party, and that the beast's stomach has been converted to a massive dance floor for other bears. Finn tries to warn these bears about the fact that they'll soon be digested, but none of them wants to listen. So he and Jake head to the chief bear, Party Pat. Party Pat refuses to listen to them until they party with him, so they eat pancakes, drink energy honey, and dance with the other bears until Party Pat hears them out. But the bears refuse to listen anyway, celebrating the fact that they're in a monster stomach. Finn and Jake lament that they can't save the partying bears, but admit that it's not so bad as long as the monster doesn't drink lava or anything. And then the monster runs to a volcano. So they return to the party, planning to evacuate the bears by bumming them out with a sad song about how food is dead. This depresses the bears enough to listen to reason, just as a wave of lava rushes towards them. They have to escape through the other exit, and after treating the injured, Finn's able to convince Party Pat to renegotiate with the monster to party in its stomach without launching off fireworks, as long as the monster agrees to eat less dangerous stuff. The bears inside the belly of the beast are happy, and sometimes happy people are content enough to ignore incoming dangers, like digestion. There's a reason for the phrase, bread and circuses. People overlook anything in the future if they're having a good time right now. So when the bears are warned that they're about to be digested by the beast who consumed them before, they're uninclined to believe Finn and Jake, because if things are so bad, how come they're having a good time? At a certain point, they have to give up on saving the bears from their fate simply because the bears have no interest in being saved. They're far too focused on the immediate setting than the facts of the future. It's not until the danger is escalated that Finn and Jake are finally able to save them, not by showing the danger, they still would have partied while being melted by lava, but by bumming them out enough that they could finally learn that things could get worse. This is a state of mind they're only receptive towards after seeing things get moderately worse in a short period, a reminder that all good times are temporary. But by the end of the episode, once they lose their partying place, the bears are able to get it back, not by rushing haphazardly into a bad situation once more, but by using a bit of logic to earn the good times again. Because while good times and partying are always temporary, bad times and lava are temporary too. The Limit. Finn and Jake are talking about the ancient psychic tandem war elephant they want when they see a distress beacon sent by the Hot Dog Princess's Hot Dog Knights. They're trapped in a labyrinth and need the duo to help them out, so Jake ties his legs to a stump so he can easily find his way back. Finn and Jake are able to track them down almost immediately, but instead of asking to be rescued, the Knights request that they be taken further inside, as the center of the maze is a place where people can get their wishes granted. Excited for their ancient psychic tandem war elephant, Finn and Jake press onward, with Jake stretching himself thinner and thinner, wrapping around monsters, plugging up traps, and solving various puzzles. But by the time they're very near the end, Finn has realized that Jake has pushed himself too hard and can barely move. He tries to encourage Jake to stop helping them and to allow him to solve the last few traps himself, but with a bit of peer pressure from the Hot Dog Knights, Jake keeps on going. They reach the end of the maze, where a Quandrius offers them wishes. Finn asks Jake to wish for their ancient psychic tandem war elephant, while he wishes for Jake to be rescued. But Jake is too hungry and he wishes for a sandwich instead. So Finn wishes for the ancient psychic tandem war elephant, as it was both their dreams. Then he lets the elephant tame itself to telepathically communicate that he wants Jake saved. The ancient psychic tandem war elephant wishes to free Jake, and they fly off into the sunset. This is an episode all about peer pressure, the peer pressure that Jake feels to keep pushing himself well beyond the point where it stops making sense for him to go on. At first, Jake stretching himself out is a good idea. It stops them from getting lost like Theseus and his ball of yarn. As they go on, the idea starts to get a bit worse, though Jake is content to power through it, as he is just as eager to get the wishes at the end of the maze as everyone else. But Finn starts to realize he'll have to use his wish to save Jake, making half of their journey completely pointless. Sure enough, by the end of the trip, Jake is stretched far too thin to make any sense, wasting his wish on a sandwich instead of something more logical, though this is an understandable mistake as he is under a lot of stress, both literally and figuratively. But this episode is not content to make such an obvious moral as to have them lose everything because Jake gave in to peer pressure. Instead, their final puzzle is solved not by doing the right thing, but by making Jake give in to peer pressure even more. Then rather than saving Jake, Finn uses his final wish to get the ancient psychic tandem war elephant he wanted from the start. The elephant then becomes a deus ex machina that saves everyone, ensuring that Finn and Jake learn nothing, and that Finn didn't have to sacrifice his wish to save his friend, nor did peer pressuring Jake into pushing himself too hard actually cost anything. A Quandrius, the snake meant to teach them a lesson by putting them into a quandary of morals, even calls them out for this, as if he were a commonplace narrative device, upset at the status quo and the fact that he didn't get to deceive anyone. Video makers. Finn and Jake are hosting a pre-Mushroom War movie night, with all their friends over, only to be stopped when they see the pre-movie warning about copyright. Respecting the law, Finn decides to cancel movie night until his friends ask if they'll still gather next week, to which Finn decides that he and Jake are going to make their own movie, which they can show freely. They attach a camera to Me-Mow and have them run around recording random things they see around Ooh, but realizing that this won't make for a good film, they decide to direct things that will happen nearby. Finn wants the movie to be an action-adventure, while Jake was hoping to shoot a romantic comedy, and both of them dislike the scenes the other one is describing as great. They ask Me-Mow to edit all their footage, arguing over which scenes were better and asking Me-Mow only to include the best footage so they can decide who was right between Finn and Jake. Rather than answering this question, Me-Mow shuts off, so they have to wait until the next movie night to know for sure. The event arrives, with Finn and Jake still arguing and making things awkward for their guests, until Me-Mow starts to show the end result, a montage of all the time Finn and Jake spent together, with the soundtrack urging them to stop fighting. They realize their argument was silly and make up, as Me-Mow says the movie's catchphrase, "Check please." Finn and Jake disagree on the direction their movie ought to take, with Jake trying to create something more personality-driven involving romance and humor, as Finn wants something with more exploration and action, two things that best reflect their respective motivations, as Finn constantly seeks out quests and adventure, while Jake is just in it to be with his closest friends. So they argue over how to best represent the land of Ooo, as neither of them can agree on what the best parts of it are. At least, at first. Because when they started making the movie, they both had the same idea about what to film. Random people doing whatever. The best part of the land of Ooo is the people in it, regardless of whether they're doing something romantic or action-packed or whatever. This is what Me-Mow is able to recognize by the end of the episode, that Finn and Jake ought not to argue over what's better, because the best part of the world is already right in front of them, and all around them in that room on movie night. Mortal Folly. Princess Bubblegum introduces Finn and Jake to the Lich, who has been sealed within amber since Billy fought him so many years before. She gives them tiaras like hers, and explains that the gems inside will protect against the Lich's magical suggestion. But then the snail from Finn's bag pokes its head out, getting lured over to the Lich and freeing him from his prison. Princess Bubblegum urges Finn and Jake to go after the Lich, giving them the gauntlet of the hero Billy as a weapon capable of fighting him off, only to be interrupted by the Ice King asking for Finn and Jake's blessing to marry PB. They blow him off and rush over to track down this Lich, though the Ice King keeps stopping them in their search, forcing Finn to use the gauntlet to blast his way past. Infuriated, the Ice King kidnaps PB, claiming he was forced to by Finn's refusal to talk, and then flies over to catch up. Finn and Jake catch up to the Lich, but are stopped from shooting by the Ice King dangling PB in the way, and the Lich makes it to his lair where he begins an incantation. Finn is ready to strike the Lich with the gauntlet, but the Lich merely shatters it, knocking Finn over and breaking its protective crystal. Finn's called over to dive into the Lich's pool, only for the sweater Princess Bubblegum gave him to give him the power to resist suggestion. Realizing that the power of liking someone a lot can fend off the Lich's magic, Finn wraps the sweater around the Lich's head and destroys it. The Ice King, celebrating with the other, decides to let Princess Bubblegum go, only to accidentally drop her into the Lich's well. Mortal Recoil. The doctors of the Candy Kingdom do everything they can to reassemble Princess Bubblegum after falling into the Lich's well. As it was the Ice King's fault that she fell in the first place, they kick him out to allow the doctors to work. The princess appears to make a full recovery, though she is still sluggish and unresponsive, so Finn and Jake stay behind to cheer her up with flowers and magic tricks, which gets PB out of bed enough to ask Finn for a few things. But Jake starts to grow confused when PB starts acting up, wilting all the flowers, then later igniting her bedroom before Finn returns with a bunch of flammable materials as per her request. They see her using these items to create a concoction that she consumes to grow massive and angry, catching the Ice King snooping on her when Finn and Jake are launched through a wall. Finn tries to use the sweater from before to rescue her, but she simply punches him away, forcing the duo to rely on the Ice King's help to stop her. The Ice King freezes PB, which temporarily saves the day until the frozen giant tips over, shattering into pieces. Once again, the doctors try to save her life, but as there's not enough bubblegum to save her, she winds up de-aged to 13. The Ice King gives up on trying to marry her because of this, but Finn realizes they're now the same age. The Candy Kingdom celebrates her return, all except the snail, now possessed by the Lich. Had this episode of Adventure Time been pitched during the first season, it would have come across as an insane thing to say. Nothing about the show's tone implied there were evil liches lurking about, and the fact that a major character can be implied to have died at the end is a departure from the lighthearted silliness of the show's original premise. And yet, for all the changes that occurred over the 2 years the show had been on the air up to this point, this two-parter doesn't come across as jarring in the least, largely because the plot relies on so much that has already been referenced. It isn't just some random lich that had been sealed away in the past. We already heard the legend and met Billy, the hero who sealed him away in the first place. Finn and Jake chase after the lich by going beyond a series of past set pieces. They aren't just rushing over to save the world from some generic apocalyptic event, they're saving Ooo, a kingdom we've come to know as a character in itself, from destruction at the hands of a known quantity. The stakes can only be high when what's being threatened is something that the characters care about, something that's almost explicitly conveyed as the thing that saves Finn from being controlled by the Lich is the power of love from the sweater he got from PB. The fact that people care about the world, setting, characters, and so on is what gives the episode its stakes, but it's also the thing that saves it. Because it's silly to destroy a planet that you've just spent 2 seasons selling the audience and caring about, and not silly in the usual way Adventure Time's known for. The Ice King is especially frustrating in this episode as his constant attempts to marry Princess Bubblegum get in the way of the far more serious plotline. It's fitting that the antagonist from the pilot episode, with the same scheme he's had since the pilot episode, is back to interrupt an episode where the stakes of the series escalate in such a transformative way, as if to compare how much the show has changed in these 2 seasons, and then to shove the guy out of the way at the end of the episode when he realizes that PB is now physically 13 years old, and thus too young for the Ice King to chase after. But who can chase after PB now is Finn, who has always been held at arm's length from Princess Bubblegum due to the age difference between the two. At least, now that's the reason he's rejected. So with Princess Bubblegum now closer to Finn's age and further from the Ice Kings, there's a new direction for the show to take, one that is less totally random than before, as the characters of the show can actually develop and the setting can be used to a greater extent. Sure, this episode wraps up Season 2 in a way that could be shocking to viewers, but what is more surprising is the fact that it's not that much of a shock at all. The truth behind the Land of Oo has been alluded to subtly, that by the time we start seeing the stakes escalate as well, it feels like it was just a matter of time before it happened, instead of coming out of nowhere. The Lich does not belong in the first season of Adventure Time, but he fits in fine now. Heat Signature. Finn and Jake head to Marceline's house to watch the movie Heat Signature, where they meet some of her ghost friends. While complaining about how uncomfortable Marcy's couch is, they notice that she can just float and ask if they can become vampires like her. Marcelline doesn't actually want to turn them, so she decides to prank the duo by pretending to bite them. She then unleashes Finn and Jake on the world, convincing them they are unlocking vampire powers like invisibility, which they believe they're using to scare LSP while she's living in the woods. Marcy's friends then start kicking Finn and Jake as their next power, which Marcy thinks is a step too far, taken to an extreme when they raise the duo to a peak to teach them to fly. Marcelline rescues them from their fall, but Finn and Jake believe they are actually flying and excited to go to a ghost party later, in spite of Marcelline's warnings that the ghosts are just going to eat their organs. Finn and Jake arrive at this party and are immediately attacked, finally realizing they never had powers in the first place. Marcelline arrives not to save them because vampires can't beat ghosts, but to apologize. While lamenting that they're going to die just because they wanted to be comfortable watching Heat Signature, the ghosts stop eating them as they're excited to watch the movie as well. The episode ends with Finn and Jake sitting uncomfortably on Marcelline's couch, while the rest of the undead are enthralled by the film. The difference between a peer and a friend is knowing where someone's limits are. Finn is okay with the series of pranks involving pretending to be invisible and being kicked by ghosts, and Marcelline finds them funny as well. It's not like the narrative of this episode is even condemning the actions of pranksters. The first thing that Finn and Jake do when they think they're invisible is run over to scare the now homeless Lumpy space princess. The difference between Finn and Marcelline versus Finn and the ghosts isn't whether a group is willing to play pranks on another one, but the intention of these pranks. A good prank is one where, once the prank is over and revealed, everybody involved is laughing, not just the perpetrators. So Marcelline tricking Finn into thinking he's a vampire is harmless because it's a bit of ketchup on his neck. But tricking him into thinking he can fly by tossing him off of a cliff is dangerous because the ghosts didn't actually care enough about Finn and Jake to let them be in on the joke. This is why Marcelline can bully her friends a bit and still come across as though she cares about them. She isn't bullying them for her own entertainment, but for the entertainment of the group, the sort of thing where everyone gets to look back on the situation and laugh. Conquest of Cuteness. Jake is excited to eat an everything burrito he's created when he and Finn hear noises from outside. These noises are the Cute King and some of his minions, who demand that Finn and Jake surrender or die. Finn and Jake think that the Cute King and his army are too adorable to fight and don't think of them as a threat. so the cute king threatens Jake's unattended everything burrito. Too nervous that it's been tampered with, Jake buries the food instead of eating it, staying up at night because he's paranoid about the cute army. These suspicions are confirmed when they see cute soldiers scampering about their house, making threats of invasion. The next morning, this cute army arrives and charges at Finn and Jake's treehouse, though they wind up routing themselves with various shenanigans. They see the cute king crying because his army can't win any battles, so Finn and Jake decide to give them the win they want by inviting their friends over to fake a defeat by covering themselves in ketchup and surrendering. But the cute king sees through this ruse, lamenting that he's even more of a failure and that cuteness won't get you anything. But Finn cheers him up by teaching him how to use his powers to manipulate others, starting with the Ice King. Not everybody is cut out to do everything, at least not in every way. The cute king and his soldiers desperately want to be conquerors, but their combat abilities are severely lacking. Any attempts they make at fighting are repelled without the target having to do anything. Finn and Jake even struggle to fake that they lost a fight to the group. They're that bad at fighting. But conquest doesn't have to be done by the end of a sword. The cute king and his minions were more than capable of scaring Jake into burying his burrito by manipulating him into thinking they'd actually done something to it. His ability to manipulate was far greater than his ability to fight. So had the king simply used the strategies best suited to his appearance, he could have achieved the end goal he wanted, even though he was unable to do it in the intended way. By the end of the episode, the cute king does finally manage to make some headway in his conquest, not by fighting the Ice King directly, but by doing what he does best, being unassuming. Morituri Te Salutamus. Finn and Jake come across a cursed arena calling to them, recognizing that it's a trap that will force them to fight gladiator ghosts in order to leave. Thinking that this sounds cool, they go inside, and are predictably trapped and forced by the Fight King to fight gladiator ghosts who constantly apologize to their companions. But instead of being allowed to leave afterwards, they're buried in a cave underground to await their next challenger. Finn comes up with a plan to fight his way out by going along with what the Fight King says until he can escape, while Jake gets distracted and tries digging for lava so he can make a forge, so he can make a hula hoop, so he can become a hula dancer, to improve fighter morale. Finn makes a fake Jake out of clay and ascends, fighting more and more of the ghosts as he starts to be affected by the Fight King's blessings, soon becoming bloodthirsty and craving more fight. Jake continues searching for lava while singing about tropical islands before emerging to the surface, where the Fight King orders Finn and Jake to fight to the death. Jake doesn't want to fight, but Finn keeps chasing him down, eventually demanding a larger sword so he can reach his companion. The Fight King obliges and gives his sword to Finn, who destroys it, freeing all the trapped ghost gladiators. Finn reveals this was his plan all along, and that he told a fake plan to Jake because he knew Jake struggled to stick to plans. The real thing that defines Finn and Jake's relationship is how well they work together without consciously needing to coordinate. Both of them see a cursed arena, identify it as such, and then agree to run inside without having to say their plan. Both are content that whatever happens inside, they'll be able to escape together, and both are correct. Finn's acting likely would have confused Jake if he had been above ground for the duration of the plan, but rather than deriding the guy for always messing things up, Finn instead figures out a way to work his brother's behavior into the strategy. True friendships aren't about forcing the other person to be more like you, or changing yourself to be more like them, but about acknowledging their strengths as well as their weaknesses and working around those together. Memory of a memory. Finn and Jake are told by Marceline's spirit wizard that she's in danger because she hit herself with a sleep spell and can't wake up. They're told they need to go into her memories to retrieve the moment where she cast the spell on herself so they can erase it and she'll be awake. Finn's given a magic mark to let him know which memory is the right one, and they get sent inside her mind. There, they see Marcelline as a child in a rundown shack fixing a teddy bear. They see Marceline's father eating her fries, and they watch her move into their treehouse with the wizard named Ash. They finally close in on the memory, just beyond one where Marcelline breaks up with Ash for selling her childhood teddy bear to buy a magic wand. Finn and Jake leave, giving the memory to the wizard, who reveals himself as Ash, Marceline's current boyfriend, because Finn removed the memory of the two breaking up. Ash and Marcelline leave, with Jake following them with his nose, where they come up with a plan to give Marcelline her memory back. Using Jake as a distraction, Finn sneaks into Ash's house and uses some of the leftover magic they used to enter Marcy's mind to go into Finn's. After seeing Finn singing the Buff Baby song, Marcelline is shown Finn's memory of Marceline's memory of Ash selling the teddy bear. They leave Finn's mind, where Marcelline greets Ash on his way back from Jake's distraction, where she immediately attacks him. This episode dives a bit into Marceline's past, ostensibly to explain a previously unheard-of relationship which she had with Ash, though he is far less important than the real glimpse we see of Ooh in her earliest memories. The setting itself seems to be a character, just one who's mostly had its development in the past, as we see that long ago, the world had far more shattered glass and moss-covered vehicles. Marcelline holds little attachment to so much in the world due to having seen it all destroyed before, her childhood, or what could be considered a childhood, being one of very little material resources. Suddenly, the angst of her father eating her fries holds a lot more weight, considering they were eaten in a destroyed diner. A few more looks at her memory are given, like her moving into Finn and Jake's treehouse before they were there, and the fact that she once had a relationship with a man who she never mentions. Of course, she has good reason for not mentioning him, as he also hurt her by giving away a teddy bear, specifically because it had sentimental value. So the two most traumatic events we've seen from her thus far involve her personal affects being taken away, though there's still a little bit we can infer, such as the fact that she owns a couch that's too hard to sit on because she floats. A few of the items she has are just things for the sake of having things. Because she grew up with so little, she compensates by being the type to never throw anything out, even if it is functionally useless to her, like fries that don't even have red color, and furniture she never uses. They're hers, and that's far more important than what they can do. Hitman. The Ice King is trying to kidnap the Breakfast Princess with a love potion he mixed into honey, so she calls Finn and Jake to take care of him, which they do by grounding the Ice King. Upset that Finn and Jake grounded him, the Ice King hires a hitman to hit the duo, thinking that this is a literal statement. This hitman, the Scorcher, arrives and signs a contract with the Ice King, and then proceeds to try to burn down Finn and Jake's treehouse. The Ice King puts out the fire but is caught by Finn and Jake, who are too busy being horrified by considering the implications of eating Meatman. When the Scorcher tries consuming the duo in black smoke, only for the Ice King to blow it all away, the Ice King realizes that he hired an assassin, and tries to bribe the Scorcher not to finish the job. This doesn't work, so he hires a hitman, though the Scorcher dispatches him as well. The Ice King distracts the Scorcher by claiming someone was hit in the boingloings, before freezing him and flying over to warn Finn and Jake. They're skeptical of the Ice King's ranting until the Scorcher arrives, chasing them away where the Ice King protects them inside of an igloo. He offers to lower their heart rate with ice to make it appear as though they are dead, so the Scorcher will stop chasing them, then does it anyway when Finn and Jake don't agree. At the end of the previous season, the Ice King was effectively replaced as the primary antagonist of the show, not so much because the Lich took that position, but because the Lich made the position far more respectable, to the point where the Ice King didn't really live up to that title any longer. He was never especially threatening, but the show didn't need a threatening bad guy. It needed someone who played off the main characters well and who fits the tone of the setting. Now there's a deeper undercurrent of a far greater horror beneath the surface, so it's hard to take the Ice King seriously anymore because we now have perspective of what should be taken seriously. The Scorcher is an antagonist who should be taken seriously, but the Ice King doesn't know this. To him, Adventure Time is still in its first season, and he's the big bad guy getting stopped by the heroes. When he hires a hitman, it's to hit man, because that's the sort of scheme he would come up with. It's all kidnapping princesses, but never murder. Through this episode, the Ice King isn't fighting against a hitman or against Finn and Jake, he is fighting continued irrelevance in the face of a changing show, as he becomes less and less necessary to the new dynamic that has formed since the pilot. Too young. Finn is on a date with Princess Bubblegum where he tries out a bathing agent that mostly burns his mouth. Then, the Earl of Lemongrab enters the castle, calling the state of the kingdom unacceptable, and declaring he is now in charge because Princess Bubblegum is too young to rule. PB explains that Lemon Grab was one of her first failed experiments and that he is technically correct in taking over until she comes of age. But Finn's convinced that the duo can prank him into submission. These pranks mostly result in Lemon Grab sending random people to the dungeon, but Finn's undeterred, ready to pour some of the spicy potion into Lemon Grab's food. Lemon Grab falls out of a window and eats some dirt, but ultimately recovers and sends everybody in the kingdom to the dungeon. Once there, Princess Bubblegum laments that she'll have to re-age herself to an adult so she can take back her kingdom, as once she does so, she won't be able to spend time being a kid with Finn. Each of the candy citizens in the dungeons offers a bit of themselves to PB, who then attaches the candy to her with the warmth of a hug from Finn. Once an adult, she fires Lemon Grab and things return to normal, including the fact that she and Finn are too far apart in age to date. Princess Bubblegum used to be a title, just something to call a character to make her better fit into the setting. Adventure Time was about adventurers, and adventurers rescue princesses, not just random women. But now the title actually means something, as Princess Bubblegum has a kingdom to rule over and responsibilities beyond the very childish roles of having a good time. As the show matures, so too must the characters. So the princess doesn't get to stay as a little girl forever, and she has to move on from kids like Finn, and move on from acting like a kid in addition to being one. This isn't to imply that this changes for the worse, though. When the show started out and characters existed for individual bit roles, it was more acceptable to have them be one note. The princesses have the role of being kidnapped so they can be rescued. They had no characterization beyond objects to be won at the end of a plot. But as these characters return, they become more developed, and with these new developments comes an idea that they ought to get rid of those earlier objectifications. No longer does Princess Bubblegum exist so Finn can make the claim that he saved a princess. She's now a member of royalty, with the additional responsibilities of that role. Adventure Time is a show that matures along with its audience, so the characters have to move on from the very simple archetypes they began as, while the people watching these characters grow additional capacity to understand the changes. The Monster. Finn and Jake are given a message from Lumpy Space Princess's parents, saying they want their daughter to come home. They're given a basket of sandwiches to take to the princess, and they head into the woods where she's been living since last season. But before they can find LSP, Finn and Jake are stopped by the fat villagers, who are scared and hungry because of a monster that's been eating their food. Finn and Jake agree to help them out, only to enter the windmill where the monster's been sleeping, where they find LSP. She explains that after her parents tried to get her to move back in with them, she ran away where she was found by a pack of wolves. These wolves raised her as one of their own until she began to gossip about them, eventually being chased away where she came upon the village. Due to her disheveled state, the villagers accused her of being a monster, and she never corrected them as she could use the monster rumor to take their food. Finn and Jake ask her to apologize to the fat village, but LSP merely insults them and argues she did a favor by stealing their food. But when she realizes that the villagers have children of their own to feed, she agrees to give up her sandwiches and return home. LSP began the show as an entitled brat who feuded with everybody, something very typical of everyone living in Lumpy Space. After her introduction episode, the follow-ups all saw her living in the woods as though she were homeless, and here we get to see why. She moved out there intentionally rather than dealing with her parents any longer. While this seems like it's a sign that she's detached from reality and living in squalor as a result, it is important to remember that Finn himself lives with a dog in a treehouse. It's not unrealistic in the land of Ooh for children to survive on their own. It's only LSP who seems to be struggling with this. But maybe her faults are just because she is far from home. LSP is able to fit in just fine when she's around people who already accept her, but around strangers she's far less capable of adapting. The wolves only accepted her for as long as she stayed silent, but once she was comfortable enough to go back to her usual habits, they turn on her and chase her out. The fat village lives in fear of her until seeing the truth, content to chase her out with pitchforks instead of accepting an apology that, while sarcastic and full of her pausing to eat in front of starving people, is still far more than what we usually see out of the Lumpy people. It's her parents acting out of character by sending an apology and some food while being a bit more heartfelt that finally grounds her not in Lumpy culture but Ooh culture, where she now has context for her actions being out of whack. Still. Finn and Jake wake up one morning to realize neither of them can move. The Ice King comes into their house and reveals he sprayed freezing potion on them while they slept, and that he intends to befriend them while they're frozen. He also brings along Gunter, who keeps trying to smash the bottles and gets kept on a leash. With his senses dulled from the potion, Finn tries to use his enhanced mind sense to project himself into the astral plane to summon an astral beast. So Jake is stuck trying to negotiate with Gunter to bring over the unfreezing potion bottle. The Ice King tries playing games with them, like dressing up as each other, showing off his collection of penguin photos, and having late-night gab sessions. The next morning, Finn manages to make contact with his astral beast, which is a swarm of butterflies. He gives up on escaping, but Jake uses his mind powers to make the butterflies form a giant hand, which gives him the idea to use their newfound astral powers to force the Ice King to unfreeze them, bringing over a bottle and slapping him around a bit. But it turns out they brought over the freezing potion bottle and all three are frozen, as Gunter breaks the unfreezing potion. A bottle episode is an episode of a show that takes place entirely within a single location, done to save on set changes, costume changes, and to make filming take less time in the interest of saving money. At least, usually. While the bottle episode began that way, they are now frequently done as a challenge for the writers, or because staff finds a sort of plot device interesting enough to do it, without saving money, but because it makes a narratively interesting episode. Case in point, it's done in an episode of an animated series where it can't possibly save much more time than using existing backgrounds. This episode is a bottle episode in spirit, if not in practice. Finn and Jake are frozen, so they can't move around much or leave the house, giving them a reason to spend time around the Ice King because they can't help it. The limited scope of the plot is maintained, and whatever the writers couldn't normally do, like make mortal enemies spend time amicably together, is done. So interestingly, this is a bottle episode that actually takes advantage of the limitations to do more, instead of doing less, while still keeping the focus on characterization. And, astral butterflies. Wizard Battle. Finn and Jake are excited to watch the annual Wizard Battle, rooting against the Ice King as he plans on cheating to win the contest. But the prize for this year is revealed, a kiss from Princess Bubblegum, and Finn worries that the wrong wizard will win and take the kiss. So he disguises himself as a wizard and enters the contest, seeking out the least offensive wizard to help win. He discovers Daniel, a wimpy wizard who's expecting to die, and decides to help this man out. Once many of the other wizards take each other out, Finn uses Jake's powers to stop many of the obstacles before eventually taking out the Ice King by turning his weapon into a butterfly, then turning it back over his head. Finn forfeits the match and gets turned into a kitten, but when it's time for Daniel to claim his prize, his newfound confidence turns him into a jerk, and Finn starts to worry he picked wrong. So by sheer willpower, Finn untransforms and screams at Daniel so hard he dies. Finn gets shamed for using a power shriek, but since he has technically won the contest, he gets the kiss anyway. But Finn trips on his way to collect his prize, revealing the costume. Princess Bubblegum gives him a kiss anyway, but also slaps him for harming the sanctity of Wizard Battle. Finn is an archetypal warrior who does the archetypal warrior things, and so on and so on. I've started a few episode reviews this way already, so it's not new information. But I bring it up again because one of the things that the traditional idea of a hero is supposed to do is to protect fair maidens, and that's like medieval spelling fair or whatever. And Finn's target of affection is Princess Bubblegum, whose hand and lips he vows to guard against the wiles of the Ice King or some other random wizard. The issue is that this is an idea that originates from tales hundreds of years old, using ideas of chivalry that are also hundreds of years old. While being respectful is ageless, the coddling sort of manipulation Finn attempts here is not the sort of behavior that's looked well upon by modern audiences and writers alike. Basically, Princess Bubblegum knew what she was doing and had a right to do it. And in Finn's attempts to control her life, he wound up embarrassing himself with a shameful power shriek and ruined the wizard battle. It's not like this sort of action is all bad per se. In fact, Princess Bubblegum's able to recognize the intention behind it not as sinister, but because Finn cared too much. This is why she slapped him, but also gave him a kiss in the end. Also, when the wizards are told that the prize for winning will be a kiss from PB, the Huntress Wizard is among those celebrating. Fionna and Cake. Fionna is helping Prince Bubblegum prepare for the Gumball Ball, and he invites Fionna to go with them as pals. The Ice Queen breaks in and attacks the duo, freezing the prince in slush before Fionna is able to save him. Prince Gumball is grateful for being rescued and offers to go out with Fionna later that day. Fionna talks to Cake about this date, saying that it's just friends hanging out and it doesn't mean anything. But when she arrives at the gardens, Neil Patrick Harris, Prince Bubblegum, gives Cake some catnip and gives Fionna a sword. They then fly around on their mounts, with the prince giving gifts to Fionna before the two are left alone on a hill where they talk all evening. Prince Bubblegum formally asks Fionna on a date to the Gumball Ball, and she accepts, showing up in a dress and everything. But as soon as she arrives, the prince takes her up to his bedroom, where Fionna notices the prince frozen to the ceiling, and the prince that she spent the day with was actually the Ice Queen in disguise. The two fight each other for a bit, with Cake hearing the commotion and getting the wrong idea. After Fionna is able to kick off the Ice King's crown, she's defeated. In celebration, Prince Bubblegum offers to date her, but Fionna turns him down, saying her real love is the Ice King, something Cake agrees with. It's revealed the whole story was actually fanfiction written by the Ice King that he's been forcing Finn and Jake to listen to. Fionna and Cake began as a few comics the character designer made based off of 4chan's Rule 63 thread for gender-swapped versions of characters. This isn't the first time fan content has appeared in Adventure Time, and it's far from the last. Entire characters and episodes are based off of sketches fans will do, and the way the show moves forward is driven as much by the creatives in charge as it is the fans of their work. That's to say, the two groups overlap enough that a reasonable take is that the biggest Adventure Time fans are the ones who work on the show. So the fact that the entire Fionna and Cake story in this episode is revealed to be fanfiction written by the Ice King is a fitting ending, as basically every episode of the show up to that point has been fanfiction of the series, which is basically just canonized as they invent it. A staple of fanfiction is taking minor details and fixating on them, which is basically just how plots are built upon already. Another is to ship characters incessantly, ignoring or rewriting details that make that weird, like aging up Fionna to be the same age as Prince Bubblegum so it doesn't come across as awkward. And of course, there's the self-insert character, which, as far as it's obvious, thus far really only consists of fill. Nowadays, Fionna and Cake is its own series, so anything I'd go into more detail about would appear in a separate video to be uploaded when it's done. What was missing? While Finn is admiring his secret wad of Princess Bubblegum's hair, a mysterious Door Lord appears out of a door from nowhere and steals it from him. He runs around stealing various other cherished items from Jake, Princess Bubblegum, and Me-Mow before appearing in Marceline's house where they all catch up to him in a valley, only to be locked away from the last door. An inscription on this door claims that only a song from a genuine band can open it, so they get out various instruments to perform a version of Marceline's I'm Just Your Problem, about how PB dislikes her for not being perfect enough. This nearly works until she starts to sing about wanting to bury Bubblegum, and the door shuts again. They try to figure out what's wrong with their music, with PB and Marcy blaming each other and storming off, as does Jake because he's pretending to be the band's jerk. As Finn watches them walk away, he begins to sing about how he doesn't want his friends to leave, and this begins to open up the door, as what it wanted was a genuine song from a band. Everyone else joins in with the door, revealing the Door Lord on the other side who, through grunting, explains that he took their cherished items because he wanted them to learn the real treasure was friendship. They beat him up and get their stuff back, finding out that Princess Bubblegum's item was a shirt Marceline gave her long ago, and that Marceline didn't have an item, she just wanted to spend time with her friends. As with the previous episode, this episode 2 shows how much of the show is influenced by its fans and their interpretations of events. Prior to this episode, the only real interaction we saw between Marceline and Princess Bubblegum was a minor acknowledgement, as if they lived in separate spheres and never interacted much. This episode recontextualizes that relationship into one where they don't interact much because they don't get along. For them to not get along, there has to be some interaction between them in the past, and so an entire relationship is created through implication during this episode, that the fan community then decided meant that they used to date, as Marcy's song sounded like something someone may sing after a breakup. In the episode itself, the Door Lord steals several precious objects to the people of Oo, and while his intended lesson is that objects are just things and friendship is more important, the gang beats him up anyway to take their stuff back, because representations of things have value as well. Jake had a childhood blanket, Princess Bubblegum had a t-shirt from an old love, and Finn had a lock of hair from last season's episode to cut a woman's hair, which honestly was a little bit too Ice King for comfort. Marcelline had nothing stolen, yet she still went after the Door Lord when he ran by with the others, the implication being that her real, precious object was Princess Bubblegum, who was stolen when her shirt was taken. Apple Thief. Jake cooks a Korean-style meal, but Finn wants apple pie instead. So they go to Tree Trunks' house only to see it's been ransacked, and her apples are all missing. As they're looking for clues that will lead them to the culprit, they see Raggedy Princess in a ditch, claiming she was pushed over by some ne'er-do-wells. Remembering his old hangout from his criminal past, Jake takes them to the Candy Tavern, where they make a mess of themselves to look like they belong, before asking around about apples. The barman takes them to an alleyway where a few apple sales are being negotiated. But instead of talking, the men rough them up while mentioning a rival gang's leader. Following a hint imprinted on Finn's face, they go to this gang's headquarters and lie their way inside, where Me-Mow leads them to an apple stash, only to reveal he was talking about diamonds, called apples as a street name. This scene erupts into gang violence, so Finn, Jake, and Tree Trunks sneak out and return home alongside Mr. Pig, who had been forced to eat rival criminals by the gang. Mr. Pig hears a stash of apples inside Tree Trunks' house, and it's revealed the apples were in her locked cabinet all along. Tree Trunks calls the banana guards on herself, but as she's being led away, one of the guards comments that her house could use a scarecrow. This causes Finn to remember the details needed to solve the mystery. He climbs onto the roof and discovers a nest of magpies, who have been taking the apples and dropping them into a hole. This convinces everyone of Tree Trunks' innocence. The last time Tree Trunks was on an adventure, she was woefully unprepared and held back the rest of the group as she got them into more trouble than the mission was worth. This time she is on a completely different type of adventure, one of a criminal underworld rather than fantasy overworld. She's not given major billing though, with a lot of the revelations instead coming regarding Jake, who apparently used to steal bikes and snatch purses for fun because he didn't know these were wrong. It's not really clear how intentional all of these gags are, however, as for a person with a long criminal history, Jake is hardly any more well adapted to the criminal underworld of the Candy Kingdom than Tree Trunks herself. Not that any of this matters, though. The real culprit of these apple thefts was a family of birds living on the roof of Tree Trunks' house, which wraps up the episode nicely, so long as you don't ask who smashed up the windows in the first place, or who knocked over the Raggedy Princess to stop her from being the scarecrow on the premises. The fact that these apples have been getting misplaced for some time means that the hole in the roof has the same origins as the holes in her windows. Tree Trunks' house is in a state of disrepair, and she's hardly cognizant enough to maintain it herself, even trying to get herself arrested because she thinks she stole her own apples without realizing. Tree Trunks is a little bit senile, and no one ever really brings it up. The Creeps. Finn and Jake are on their way to a party they were invited to by a mystery host, where they're given masks and fake identities to don. Upon meeting the other partygoers, Princess Bubblegum, Cinnamon Bun, Lumpy Space Princess, and Me-Mow, they learn that the host is a ghost, who plans on possessing one of the partygoers and murdering the rest. Cinnamon Bun is the first to go, though Jake is convinced that his turning into a skeleton is just Finn's way of getting back at him for the events of Mystery Train. But Finn confirms it isn't a prank, and everyone starts to grow suspicious of one another, splitting up to find lights so they'll be safe the next time the lights go out. Jake and Me-Mow head to the basement where Me-Mow is grabbed by something, and Jake's screaming alerts the rest of the group to regroup in the foyer. Once there, they head together to the dining room and start quizzing each other on things only the real version of themselves would know. A ghost comes through the ceiling and melts Princess Bubblegum, and then Finn finds the bodies of Cinnamon Bun and Me-Mow in the closet, panicking before seeing LSP get absorbed by a painting. Finn and Jake make a run for it, only for Jake to get dragged away when Finn can't hold his gloves. Finn takes shelter in a room where a ghostly being pops out and surrounds him, escaping by smashing a hole in the wall. He runs up to the observatory where Jake pops out, riding on the back of Lady Rainicorn, laughing because he was able to counter-prank Finn's prank of luring them to the house for the murder mystery. Finn laughs it off, though when he asks about the mysterious ghost who was melting the walls, Jake says that was never part of his scheme, and Finn decides to store that memory in the vault. An episode that intentionally parallels Mystery Train, at first bringing up the episode as a way to remove suspicion that the whole thing could be a prank, only to pull a double reverse and reveal that it was a prank of a prank. If last season's mystery episode was able to play with the narrative tropes to come to the conclusion, this episode is able to use meta-narrative tropes to do the same thing. So instead of making accusations based on what it seems like an author would try to write, accusations are deflected by pointing out that this plot has already been done, and that's the real twist. They made this same episode 2 times. Mystery Train ends with Finn and Jake landing the train in a pile of gelatin, something not planned for that could have been real danger, to contrast the fake danger Finn believed he was in at the start. This episode also mirrors that by revealing the ghost Finn saw was a real ghost and not part of Jake's plan. This ghost becomes important later, much later, but for now it's just placed in the vault, where it doesn't get brought up again. Finn's way of repressing memories that might traumatize him. From bad to worse. While studying the zombie tissue left over from Slumber Party Panic, Princess Bubblegum turns her back for a moment and the flesh is consumed by Cinnamon Bun, who goes mad and starts infecting the rest of Oo. Finn, Jake, Lady Rainicorn, Lumpy Space Princess, and Princess Bubblegum barricade themselves in the castle, prepared to synthesize a new antidote using PB's notes from the last time this happened. But Princess Bubblegum is bit by zombies and pulled into the crowd before she can begin working, telling the others to just let science do all the work before she turns. They all flee to the laboratory, where they learn they cannot understand Princess Bubblegum's notes, so each of the survivors comes up with their own version of the antidote, briefly entertained by PB's dancing lab rat. Their antidotes don't work, giving the zombies wings, super strength, and sexy lips. And worse, LSP rushes outside to retain some of the lip potion while Jake gets bit, running away from the infection by stretching before the virus catches up to him and he turns Lady Rainicorn too. Soon it's just Finn left, who tries translating PB's notes only to get cornered and then barricades himself in the emergency shower. And then he notices that the candy corn rat's name is Science. So he lets the rat out of the cage, and Science proceeds to synthesize a cure, which Finn covers himself in before allowing the zombies to bite him. After a royal day of apologizing, Princess Bubblegum awards an honor to the hero who stopped the outbreak, her pet rat Science. A common way that Adventure Time builds on its characters and settings is by creating episodes that are direct sequels to other ones, not just an expansion of ideas, but explicitly following up on the previous plot. While in the first seasons we learn that Princess Bubblegum does weird experiments on the Candy Kingdom with disastrous side effects, here we see that she continues the experiments without learning anything. Before, it was just a silly side effect of a serum she made that caused the outbreak, and it was dispatched with a slumber party and a game of playing with pretend piñatas. This episode takes the outbreak far more seriously, with more named characters getting turned, which is of course merely the result of the fact that we now have more named characters. The consequences of an action in a TV show are always proportional to the screen time of the characters affected by it. This is why we're less inclined to treat nameless candy denizens becoming zombies as a tragedy, but when Jake and Lady Rainicorn unite in zombiehood, it's something with far more weight to it. So it's a similar episode, but instead of the moral being about trusting your friends enough not to tell them your secrets, it's about the fact that maybe Princess Bubblegum should stop naming her pets after nouns. Beautopia. Susan Strong returns, asking Finn and Jake for their help. Jake's convinced that Susan is crazy and can't be believed, but Finn offers his assistance anyway, as Susan wants his hero's heart, and his red flower, which is fire. They return down the hatch where Susan and the other humans originally came from, where she explains that they once lived in Beautopia, but had to move to the sewers when they were kicked out by Lubglubs. She tries to get Finn to swim over there, but after holding him underwater, she learns that he doesn't have gills like the rest of the human tribe. so they take a boat instead. Along the way, she recoils in fear from a pool toy she calls a love glove, confirming Jake's belief she's just crazy, which does not help their faith when she charges through a few traps laid by the love gloves. They soon arrive in Beautopia, and Susan points out a large tower, saying they must bring the flower there. More pool toys float by, with Jake trying to pop one to prove they are harmless, only for the crowd to transform into shadowy creatures. Finn and Susan fight these creatures off while Jake stretches out to bring the fire up to the tower, tossing it in and lighting up the whole town, which scares off these shadow creatures. After the rest of the human tribe returns to Beautopia, Susan Strong tries to convince Finn to stay with her, allowing him to feel under her hat where he does not touch gills. In spite of this, Finn still returns with Jake. The last time Susan Strong appeared in an episode, she left Finn and the others at the end, returning to be with their own kind in the human tribe. This time it's Finn who leaves to be with his own kind, in spite of the fact that he's discovered he and Susan are similar in both being regular humans. Because while Susan was a human like Finn, she was still raised underground among the fish people, and thus she gets along far better with those types. When she's on the surface, she's afraid of everything just like her friends are, so Finn could have moved in with the other humans to be with Susan, but he never would have authentically fit in because of where he came from. Finn has more in common with Jake, even though he's a dog, than he has in common with a woman who barely speaks the same language he does. But it's not like they're totally different. After all the experience on the surface that Susan Strong got in her first appearance, she's developed a braver personality than the others in her tribe. The very reason she seeks out Finn is because he's as brave as she wants to be, and the fact that she's made a few trips to Beautopia to take it back from the love gloves in the past means that this isn't a decision she is making lightly. She tried and failed and realized what was missing from her attempts. And just because two people are raised differently doesn't mean they'll never get along. So there's still some hope of Finn reconnecting to his past through Susan in the future, just not in the moment. No one can hear you. Finn and Jake are trying to fight a deer who keeps licking the people of the Candy Kingdom when the deer breaks Finn's leg and knocks him out. Finn wakes up in the hospital with nobody else around, hopping into a wheelchair and carting around the empty city. He eventually finds Jake, who is rummaging around in the garbage with a bandage on his head, and Jake tells him to stay quiet, as it's his birthday, and he is waiting on a surprise party to be revealed. He asks Finn to gather some firewood for his hobo fire when Finn hears some whispering coming from a sewer drain. Jake stops him from investigating this noise, claiming he just has to keep waiting for the surprise party like he's been doing for the last 6 months. Finn tries to go anyway, but gets stopped by Jake, who ties him to the tent. Finn pretends to be interested in Jake's puppet show birthday celebration in order to be untied, then he closes the tent over Jake's head, rushing over as Jake chases him, destroying his wheelchair and Finn's cast in the chase. Finn dives into the sewer where he discovers all of the Candy Kingdom citizens glued to the ceiling. Jake realizes what he's done to everyone else and goes crazy, though Finn punches the crazy out of him and he helps get everyone down in time to learn that it wasn't Jake who captured people, but the deer from before. This deer stands up and takes off its hooves, ready to fight Finn, but Jake drops his weights onto the deer's head, and they push the unconscious body into the sewer. Sometimes weirdness can be used for humor, which is basically the premise of the show, and sometimes weirdness can be used for horror, which is basically the premise of this episode. Finn wakes up in a totally abandoned Candy Kingdom, only to discover Jake acting oddly, and not the usual sort of oddness Jake is typically known for. Remember, this was a guy whose reaction to being trapped in an arena was to forge a hula hoop. Characters acting bizarre and out of character can be considered unnerving, but what's more unnerving is when they act bizarre and in character. So when it's implied that Jake did something to the rest of the Candy Kingdom, this could just be a part of a scheme of his that doesn't make any sense, combined with the brain damage he suffered, making him less predictable. Most of the cast of Adventure Time has the ability to be pretty horrifying, they simply never use their abilities this way. A deer taking off its hooves and wiggling its fingers around menacingly is not out of place in the show, and characters made of candy being stuck to stuff isn't abnormal either. But by shifting the tone of the episode to more closely mimic popular movie scenes, these standard Adventure Time gags can become something else entirely. Finn waking up in the hospital is like the start of 28 Days Later. Finn breaking his casts is reminiscent of Forrest Gump. The episode title and ending with people stuck to the ceiling is a reference to Alien. If Adventure Time was just being Adventure Time, this would have been a silly episode. But by trying to be something else, it succeeds and makes the audience reconsider what Adventure Time really is, without the detachment of childlike whimsy. Jake versus Me-Mow. Finn and Jake are visiting the Wildberry Princess to eat her pies, and because she heard there was an assassin planning to kill her. She and Finn go outside to discuss safety, while Jake stays behind to eat the last pie, only to discover a tiny cat hiding inside of it. The cat, named Me-Mow, reveals she's the assassin, as, since her cover was blown, she's going to force Jake to murder the princess for her. She does this by climbing inside of his head and threatening to poison him if he does not kill her, or if he tries to communicate what's happening. After failing a fake assassination with a stack of meat, Jake asks Finn to play him their mother's lullaby on a music box, stuffing sausages into his ears so he won't fall asleep, but everyone else will. Once they're all out, Jake tries writing that there's a cat in his nose, but Finn reads cat noise and meows loudly. Jake throws him out the window and tries to pick his nose, but wakes up Me-Mow in the process, getting stabbed with the remainder of the poison for doing so. So Jake decides to assassinate the Wildberry Princess by pushing her off of a cliff while Finn has his back turned. But before he can do this, a bird flies by and sees the sausages in Jake's ears, diving towards him and knocking Me-Mow out. Finn sees the tiny cat and begins to battle her, but Me-Mow simply smashes the antidote bottle, bragging about having poisoned Jake enough to kill a dog 50 times over. So Jake shapeshifts his liver to be 51 times the normal size and is able to neutralize the poison. Me-Mow dives for the princess with a knife, but she explodes and the cat misses, falling off a cliff. In the end, Wildberry Princess says that she needs to be taken to the hospital, and everyone agrees about them all needing to be taken to the hospital. Me-Mow is a character designed by a young fan of the show, the episode's title card being the original drawing of this character, given a pass by the designers in order to make her more animation-friendly. As I've said before, that Adventure Time is a show that is as shaped by the fans as it is by the creators, and this is the most literal interpretation of that idea possible. A fan-made character being ascended to an actual villain. Again, this isn't the first time this has happened, just the first time it's been so overt. Anyway, Jake tries to communicate that he's being threatened by a tiny cat inside his head but can't get the information across to Finn, meaning that he nearly has to kill the Wildberry Princess before he can explain what's going on. What's funny is that he was fully prepared to go through with this assassination until overhearing Me-Mow talking in her sleep about double-crossing Jake and poisoning him anyway. Not really a heroic action, but Jake's never been that heroic on his own. It's always been his relationship to Finn that keeps him good and just, which is why it was harder for Jake when he realized he couldn't manage to get Finn in on it. Jake versus Me-Mow is a lot tougher of a matchup when he does not have his brother on his side. Thank you. The episode follows a snow golem waking up and eating his breakfast of a pear and some acorns. As he's run out of pears, he heads to the border of the Fire and Ice Kingdoms, passing by Finn and Jake, who are struggling against the Ice King's invincible ice armor. But a pack of fire wolves attacks him, with the golem fighting them off before grabbing his cart and leaving. But a small fire puppy follows him home, with the golem trying to stop the puppy from staying in his house by leaving him outside. But unwilling to let the animal be exposed to the elements, he lets the puppy inside where it spends the night. He struggles with trying to feed and entertain the hound, eventually planning to return it to its home when he hears the other wolves howling overnight. The next morning, the snow golem takes the fire puppy back, passing by Finn and Jake, who have started hacking away at the Ice King's armor. He crosses the fiery plains of the Fire Kingdom, melting more and more as he tries to reunite the wolf pack. A small amount of the golem is finally able to bring about this reunion, only to be scared off by growling. The ice golem, or what's left of him, passes by the finale of Finn and Jake's fight with the Ice King, eating the sandwiches he took while watching the snow golem, as the fire wolves return and allow the puppy to play with him just a bit longer. The hedgehog's dilemma is a metaphor in which two freezing hedgehogs, or sometimes porcupines, are cold and have to share body heat, though they cannot do this without the risk of skewering each other with their spines. So even though they both have an interest in intimacy, they cannot get close to one another without mutual harm. To be close to someone is to be open with them, to be open with someone is to be vulnerable, and to be vulnerable with someone is to invite harm. But sometimes that isn't so bad. Even if getting hurt is an inevitability, spending your life totally alone is usually far worse than if you were to spend your life with someone who could hurt you. And sure, some relationships aren't worth maintaining, but to discount every social interaction you could have for a few bad ones is far worse than the risk. The snow golem in this episode is living in isolation, getting the opportunity for some companionship by taking in the firewolf as a pet. But doing this means his house burning and parts of his body coming off. So he tries to leave it outside, but this means not just more isolation, but the knowledge that he could have had something better and was just afraid to accept it. So the golem lets the wolf inside and predictably gets hurt, but who's also hurt is the firewolf, who cannot live with the snow golem for long as he lacks a consistent food source and is at risk of freezing. Not to mention, he's far from his family and his other loved ones. So the snow golem treks through treacherous lands to find a place where the wolf belonged, really belonged, a place where he wouldn't be hurt just for existing. But when all is said and done, the snow golem and firewolf reunite, hurting each other, but doing it happily, since being apart is far more painful. The New Frontier. Jake has a dream where he is floating in a void with a banana man, a rocket, and the Earth. He runs out of oxygen and then gets visited by the cosmic owl. Upon waking up, Jake realizes that he had a croak dream, meaning he now knows how he's going to croak. Finn worries about this, but Jake says there's no need to, because rocket ships haven't been reinvented yet, and he doesn't know any banana men. Then the house is visited by a banana man. Finn tries to follow this man to his house to delay Jake's death however he can, attempting to scare him off by shooting flaming arrows into his home. But Finn misses, twice, and when he goes into the woods to retrieve the arrow he shot, he finds just behind the banana man's house a rocket ship, meaning that Jake's croak dream is closer to coming true than they thought. Jake is eager to embrace his death and climbs aboard, lighting the fuse and preparing for launch. The banana man comes out to investigate the noises and sees what's going on, warning them there isn't enough fuel before the rocket crashes through a hole in the ground. All three of them fall into an underwater lake, where Jake wakes up in a black void with a banana man, a rocket, and a model of Earth, as well as Finn. Remembering that Finn wasn't there in his croak dream, he swims to the surface to rescue his friend, who vows to never again leave Jake's side. Jake is more afraid of the unknown than he is of death, this fear coming from the fact that he doesn't know how he's going to die, rather than that he may. But once he has a prophetic dream, something he knows is valid due to the presence of the cosmic owl, Jake is far less afraid of death as it no longer can sneak up on him. He learns the circumstances of his death, then manages to relax as the fear of the unknown is now mitigated. He likewise is able to calm himself down with his belief in Glob. Jake will eventually become one with everything, and thus, there's nothing to be afraid of, as he's not losing his life but gaining a higher form of sentience. But that higher form means very little to Finn, as while Jake might be one with everything and aware of his brother, Finn will still be missing him. Jake isn't afraid because he has knowledge of his croak date, but Finn doesn't, and that's the real threat. It's one that Jake recognizes as well, as he stops looking forward to dying when he realizes it will leave Finn behind, alone and afraid. This episode also subtly drops references to Glob as more than just a replacement curse for characters to say to keep the show safe for kids. It shows that there's a genuine belief in a higher power from certain characters, establishing a silly planet as one with gods and kings. Holly Jolly Secrets. Finn and Jake are digging for some treasure that Jake buried a while back, discovering a suitcase full of VHS tapes. Finn recognizes these tapes from a time he saw the Ice King trying to dispose of evidence, and connects that they must have evil secrets on them. So they put up a series of posters warning people not to attend their secret screening of the tapes, then settle down with Me-Mow to see what the Ice King is plotting. But these tapes are mostly diary entries of the Ice King, retelling various exploits about princesses he's kidnapped that Finn and Jake rescued, while occasionally lamenting that he keeps doing the same thing over and over without any changes. Also a bunch of stuff they skip over about bathing in milk and being chased by squirrels. Assuming that the Ice King has been hiding evil messages in code, the duo calls Princess Bubblegum to help them to decode the messages, but the Ice King intercepts the call after he found from the flyers that there was a screening of his tapes. When he sees their screening without him, he blows icy wind over the field as the episode ends. And then the next episode opens on the Ice King using his powers to see what these tapes are, learning that they're his and that Finn and Jake are learning his secrets. So he builds an army of snowmen to raid Finn and Jake's house while they're bundled up from the snowstorm he caused. Meanwhile, Finn and Jake are trying to have Me-Mow read into any hidden messages he might be speaking through his sobbing, but they're unable to find anything meaningful, just faux interviews with the princesses he's kidnapped. The Ice King breaks in through their chimney and has the snowmen search through the house, eventually discovering the three of them hiding under the bed. After a brief scuffle, Me-Mow starts to play the final tape, one where a pre-war scientist named Simon Petrikov discusses an artifact he found, the Ice King's crown. He mentions how he tried the crown on and began to mutter incomprehensibly, scaring off his fiancée Betty before jumping ahead to where Simon's skin has started to turn blue while the snow outside his house is falling more heavily. As Simon starts to lose his mind while discussing the things the crown lets him see, he apologizes for any future actions he takes that could hurt other people, lamenting how much he wants Betty, his princess, back into his life. Seeing this, Finn and Jake give the Ice King his tapes back, and then decide to celebrate once a year by inviting people to their house to watch movies and exchange gifts by the fire, in memory of the time they felt a little sorry for the Ice King. At the end of last season, Adventure Time introduced the Lich, an event that escalated the stakes of the show to a point where earlier plotlines were now far less serious. This is essentially an inevitability with the direction the show's been headed in. When you develop the show by almost exclusively building off of the early seasons, you'll end up making characters more developed over time. Backstories are elaborated upon, and each member of the main cast winds up with more depth to them because, unless you're retconning an earlier story beat, that's just how linear time works. So with the show building on itself and characters like the Ice King getting left behind in the shift, it would make sense that he would steadily have to be rewritten or written out. If the audience can't take him seriously as a threat, why bother making him into a threat? Some aspects of this character shift have already been made present. For example, the Ice King has spent a few episodes already treating Finn and Jake as though they were now friends, acting like all the harms in the past, although the duo does not see it the same way. Here, the only reason the Ice King even bothers to attack is because he thinks that he's been robbed when he learns that they have his tapes. Before that, it was just a curiosity and a lack of control over his decision-making skills, something we've seen before. Last season, the Ice King managed to nearly kill Princess Bubblegum by dropping her into the Lich's well. He's foiled plans, both his own and those of other people, through sheer ineptitude, more often than not. His antics have been riding the line between silly and stupid for a while, and as Adventure Time has moved further from capital S silliness, they'd come across as less believable, even for a crazy old man. And so they made him into a crazy old man. The Ice King was not always the Ice King, he became that later on. Deep down inside, he's a different person, one you can sympathize with, even if you can't justify his actions. The Ice King might not be relatable or even a nice character, but the show's not asking you to relate to or like the guy. It's asking you to relate to Simon Petrikov, or anyone who's ever known a Simon Petrikov. He's stealing princesses to replace a princess he lost, and he lacks the wherewithal to realize there's a distinction between her and everyone else now. So as Adventure Time moves into its later seasons, the show takes on a new tone, and anything that doesn't fit is either quietly forgotten about or changed to adapt. The Ice King is no longer a villain you can root against, so why not make him a tragic character who you can root for? Marceline's Closet. Marcelline has invited Finn and Jake over for a jam session, but when they get to her house, she's away, with a sign warning them not to enter. While waiting for her to return, Finn and Jake play a variant of hide and seek, but while looking for a place to hide, Jake goes inside her home. Finn enters as well when trying to get Jake out of there, but then Marcelline returns. They hide in her closet, hoping not to get caught, as Marcelline starts recording diary entries and picking her nose. They plan to escape by throwing a paper airplane with the letter on it, but it falls into a trash can just after it prepared some eggs. Jake tries tunneling out of the closet, but finds a spider in the wall, which leaps out of the closet and breaks a lamp, causing Marcelline to get her broom from the closet to sweep it up. When she floats into her bathroom to clean off afterwards, Finn and Jake use this chance to leave, but Finn stumbles into her bathroom while she's undressing and panics, entering the closet again. Finally, Marcelline falls asleep and they use this as a chance to leave, avoiding screaming when a spider bites Jake before Finn whispers loudly enough to wake her up. Their disguises don't work, because Jake shapeshifted into Finn, and Marcelline demands to know what they're doing. Finn and Jake apologize for entering her house while she was gone, but Marceline's okay with it, as she creeps in their house all the time. In the end, Finn lies in bed, now self-conscious about scratching himself. Marcelline has been shown to hang out inside of Finn and Jake's house without them knowing before, not just in Evicted when she was first introduced as having lived there, but in episodes like Go With Me as well. So the fact that she was never really upset with the duo for being in her closet for the whole episode is, in hindsight, pretty obvious, only really made ambiguous because of how worried Finn and Jake were about getting caught. They got into their own heads about how important it was that they followed a sign on her front door that was also half shopping list. Jake even nonchalantly goes inside during a game and doesn't think anything of it until Finn starts to yell. It goes to show that if one of them had stayed calm and not let the other guys panic infect them, they could have just explained things logically to Marcelline. She is their friend after all, and what kind of friend would keep their boundaries so rigid as to not let other friends into their house? Sure, boundaries are important for a person to have, but the point of relationships is that you make a second set of boundaries for the other people. If two strangers had walked into Marcelline's front door, they probably would have gotten into far more trouble. The fact that Finn and Jake looked at least a little bit apologetic about breaking and entering likely helped too, as it shows that they understood the boundary, even if they didn't respect it. Paper Pete. Jake is in the Turtle Princess's library, reading a large tome on the history and culture of rainicorns so he can better understand his future children. But Finn is bored, so he wanders around the library looking for adventure, but mostly he is shushed by the turtles around him. Finn soon finds some damaged books and uncovers the Pagelings, who ask him for assistance in a battle against the Moldos, threatening to attack the whole library. Finn tries to recruit Jake to assist in the battle, but Jake tunes him out so he can focus on reading. After blowing away some of the Moldos during a skirmish, Finn follows the fleeing mold into their lair where he gets an idea, faking as though he's going to double-cross the Pagelings so he can grab a bunch of Moldos and take them to Jake. He dumps the creatures on Jake's head, causing him to writhe in agony at the stinging sensation of their bites. He tries swatting the creatures off of Jake with a book, then notices two of the creatures eating his shirt. Realizing that Moldos prefer the taste of cloth to the taste of books and people, Finn offers his shirt to them in exchange for peace with the Pagelings. The two walk home as Jake admits he didn't actually learn anything about rainicorns because he couldn't get past the first paragraph, vowing to simply fake understanding in the future. Jake accuses Finn of going out of his way to find problems in this episode, trying to read a book in peace while Finn keeps agitating the other patrons of the Turtle Princess's library because he cannot sit still for very long. And Jake is somewhat right, as Finn spends far more time trying to prove to Jake that there are adventures out there that he doesn't stop to consider whether it's worthwhile to actually share them. He sides with the Pagelings against the Moldos, then proceeds to wipe out a group of Moldos by yawning too loud. It wasn't a very exciting adventure, nor was it especially difficult to complete, and yet Finn agitated the conflict by spending more of his effort on showing off he found an adventure than it would have taken to just stomp on a few mold spores. If his desire to adventure was really about saving the day and doing capital G good, then Finn would have very easily solved the problem of the Pagelings versus Moldos, but Finn's original goal was to pass the time because he was bored. He acts fairly convincingly like someone with an attention regulatory disorder. Finn needs something to be occupying him at all times, and if it isn't interesting, he can't focus. It's not to say that Finn never focuses, just that he has very little ability to maintain it on certain things. Large projects go uncompleted, but a bunch of little ones are far easier, like scheming to get Jake to see the tiny men living in the library, rather than just yawning them all away. Another way. Finn and Jake are stuck at home with a bunch of clown nurses that Jake hired to cure the toes they broke jumping off of birds. But Finn doesn't want to take the nurse's prescribed treatment of toe kisses, and he reads in the Enchiridion that there's a way to cure any malady with the tears of a cyclops. So Finn sets out to heal himself his own way, first encountering a split in the path where a talking stump makes him choose between a path that makes his hair fall out and one that will make him smell weird forever. Finn chooses his own way and shuffles through a bunch of thorn bushes, coming across a bush that warns him there's no way to cross an acidic river full of electric eels. But Finn chooses his own way and smacks the water away with the bush. He then comes across a man named Pan who needs help fixing his cart so he can give his wife a watermelon. But thinking this is another test, he throws the cart and crushes Pan's wife. He then realizes he went too far in going his own way and sings on top of a mountain, but the mountain turns out to be the Cyclops in disguise, and he proudly declares he will never cry for Finn, no matter how sad Finn's story is. Finn pretends not to care to lure the Cyclops closer, then punches him in the eye. Now cured, he lops off the Cyclops' head and carries it home, making the monster cry on all the people he wronged along the way before making it back. But Jake refuses the Cyclops' tears, preferring to do things his way, surrounded by clowns. Part of the reason that Finn sets out on a long journey while injured is because he values his own autonomy more than he values common sense. The other, of course, being that he is creeped out by clowns. As he goes on his journey, Finn is confronted by decisions he needs to make, continuously eschewing whatever binary he's given and taking a third, far worse option. When given an impossible decision, he goes on anyway, even though his methods are lacking. Finn even doubles down when crossing the river after he realizes that he made the first mistake, because it's not about the destination for him, it's hardly even about the journey, it's about the fact that he made a choice, and he wants the choice to be honored and acknowledged by the world around him. Was it a good choice? No, but that's not what matters. Finn eventually ends up hurting people this way, assuming that being nice was a choice and then choosing the opposite out of principle once again. His mistake was that, although he liked having things go his way, eventually doing whatever you want is going to stop other people from doing whatever they want. So it's selfish to keep making your own decisions on principle. The right way to live life is to make decisions that help the most people, yourself included. At the end of the episode, Finn is able to justify his selfish actions by turning them around, doing whatever he wants in the interest of curing everyone he hurt on his way to the Cyclops. Ghost Princess. Jake is disgusted by the softy cheese Finn is putting on their camping trip hot dogs when they hear wailing from the Ghost Princess, who says she cannot ascend to the afterlife until she learns how she died, though she has no memories of this. So Finn and Jake accompany her to the Graveyard Kingdom to investigate, where Ghost Princess meets Clarence, a gentleman ghost who defends her and shares his cheese poofs. While Clarence and the princess see a concert together, Finn and Jake go around the graveyard playing good cop, bad cop with the dead bodies, though they only find half a sword and some other junk. The princess returns from her date, saying she no longer cares about ascending, as she and Clarence are in love. Finn and Jake leave the graveyard as Jake shows off all the stuff he looted, and then Finn notices the half-sword has the phrase, "Rents" on it. They go back to Ghost Princess's grave and find the other half of the sword, containing the phrase, "Claw" on it. Finn and Jake warn Ghost Princess that it was Clarence who killed her, and she has a flashback of an ancient battle where the two lovers in life were on opposite sides of a war. Ghost Princess ascends, but Clarence is left alone on Ooh, complaining that his life is like a farce. Sorry, like a fart. Remembering this phrase, Jake has a flashback of watching a depressed Clarence eat himself to death on softy cheese, the reason he doesn't like it. And now, knowing how he died, Clarence is able to ascend with his lover. Back at the campsite, Jake agrees to try some softy cheese to get over his aversion. The Ghost Princess's goal was to rest in peace, something she assumed she would only be able to do after discovering her cause of death and making peace with that. But as Finn and Jake investigate, instead of unrooting her death, they found something for her to live for. Well, not live, but close enough. Clarence is a partner whose love found her across realms, even able to overcome whatever tragedy made them fight in the first place. When she was reconnected with him, the Ghost Princess stopped caring about her death because she had better things to do with her second life than worry. She found a way to rest in peace, it just wasn't by getting exactly what she thought she wanted. And then, she did get what she wanted. The irony is that Ghost Princess stopped caring about how she died right before finally learning, and that's what separated her from Clarence yet again. But just as they were able to find themselves in undeath, death is what brought them together a third time. Clarence, having a pathetic, albeit memorable death, is what allowed Jake to remember it, meaning that he could remind the ghost of how and why he died, letting him visit the Ghost Princess in the afterlife. Dad's Dungeon. Joshua, Finn and Jake's father, appears as a bunch of sparkles, leading the duo to a recording of him discussing how he has just died and left their inheritance, a sword made of demon's blood, inside of a dungeon he built for the two of them. But he also asks Jake specifically to go into the dungeon with the intention of having Finn do most of the work, because the whole thing is a means of toughening him up. The two find the dungeon nearby and go inside, with Finn convincing Jake not to fall for a trap involving food golems before making it to their next recording, where Joshua asks Jake to insult Finn and call him a baby. They make it to a room with an obvious fruit trap, where Jake does as his father asked, insulting Finn until Finn's depressed enough to eat the fruit on purpose. But Jake snaps him out of it, dragging him to the final room where they find another recording of Joshua talking about a monster he's going to have them fight, only to get grabbed by the monster mid-recording. So Finn and Jake rush into the room where they find this monster while it starts beating up Finn. Jake finds some of the unfinished recordings of their father where he admits the truth, and then Jake remixes them into a song, encouraging Finn to fight off the monster and claim his sword. The demon who made the sword briefly appears to ask for his blood back, but they banish him using a recording of Joshua banishing it before. Joshua is holding Finn and Jake as he's explaining to them the purpose of his dungeons, the two being tiny babies who cry a ton as babies do. In his mind, his son is still the baby he found him as, so his life's work of creating something that will toughen him up is something that winds up being a waste of time, as he ought to have spent the effort on his son in the immediate time that he had with him. Finn's dad spent so much time worrying about how his son would be in the future, he ignored how he was in the present. But Jake understands that Finn has matured significantly since they were kids, no longer singing buff baby songs, okay, maybe not that far, but certainly more capable of handling things in a rational way. Like when he encounters the ugly monster, and instead of trying to slay it, he just asks the guy to take a bath if he wants people to take his path. So all the toughening up that Joshua wants his son to do is toughening up he's already done. This means that the part where he orders Jake to insult him as a means of tearing him down is useless because he doesn't need to do that. The end result is that Finn is made to feel as though his maturity was wrong, and he falls into a depressive funk because all of the effort was for nothing rather than having a proper revelation. When you assume you know people better than they know themselves, you usually end up hurting them by being wrong, which says more about you than it does about them. Incendium. Finn acts weird around Princess Bubblegum as she is showing off her water-based pyrotechnics, then lies on the floor of his house, lamenting his one-sided crush with a song. So Jake decides to cheer up Finn by finding him a new woman to obsess over, heading out when he hears girlish screaming. These turn out to be from Flambeau, who, after being rescued, hears of Jake's journey and offers to take him to the Flame Kingdom because there's a princess there about Finn's age. He casts a fireproofing spell on Jake that turns him blue, and then they enter the Fire King's palace, where Flambeau tells Jake he has to act more royal, and then offer the king gifts. So Jake tries to produce something, throwing a water bottle at the jester and killing him, then performing Finn's song from earlier but with the lyrics tweaked to be about the Flame Princess. Finally, Jake shapeshifts into Finn, offering the Flame King a koala bear, but none of these plans work. In his confusion, Finn starts attacking Jake, and the Flame King is so impressed by the violence he agrees to let Finn date his evil daughter. Jake tries to back out of the arrangement because he didn't know the Flame Princess was evil, and him running away causes her to become enraged. The Flame Princess, assuming she is chasing Finn, chases Jake back to the treehouse where the Flame Princess's fire has spread inside and destroyed Finn's picture of Princess Bubblegum. But when it lights the water-based pyrotechnics from before, the fire is extinguished and the exhausted princess falls over. Finn saves her, where she tries to yell at him for what Jake said about her, only for Finn to say that he actually likes her. For this perceived flip-flopping, the Flame Princess slaps Finn, and he develops a crush. Princess Bubblegum began the show as a princess who needed to be rescued, whether from the Ice King or the results of her own experiments. But as Adventure Time has gone on, she has developed more of a personality beyond that, and this new personality is one that Finn doesn't mesh well with romantically. It's easy to project a relationship onto a blank slate, not so much a despotic candy scientist. And one of the last people to figure out this change in the dynamic is Finn himself, who's still in love with the Season 1 version of Princess Bubblegum. He hangs on to a piece of PB's hair because he's able to imprint whatever personality he wants to on it, but when they hang out in person, he winds up weirding her out with any direct romantic approach. So Finn is in love more so with the idea of Princess Bubblegum than with the woman herself, which is why the relationship is doomed even though he doesn't know it. Jake's attempts to find a new girlfriend for Finn end disastrously in this episode for the same reasons. He tries to fake a Finn to impress the Fire King, assigning traits that aren't there in an attempt to woo others. Even if his strategy had worked, it was still a doomed relationship because the Flame Princess would not be falling in love with Finn, but a lump of flesh attached to Jake. Interestingly though, the fact that a fake Finn has a bad relationship with the Flame Princess means the real Finn has a far better chance, like two opposites canceling each other out. Their relationship will develop more in later seasons of the show, but Season 3 wraps up with the two still in this initial shockwave of ambiguity. This was a part 1 to what will likely be a 3 or 4-part video on Adventure Time. Since my videos are designed to be listened to in the background while you are working on something else, this is a bit of a warning to begin looking for another video. I recommend one of my own, but I am of course extremely biased in this regard. I also recommend part 2 to this video though. That one may or may not be live as of the time you are listening to this section. I generally wait about 2 months between uploads of different parts of videos so I don't burn out on one subject, so you can expect the follow-up to this video to come out near the end of October. This short section will be cut out of the eventual full version of this video, which you can expect sometime in early 2026. As such, it does not make sense to include anything really important here, so it's okay if I put a few seconds of black screen and silence to make the video length an even number.